All right, we're on week 2. We made it through the easy week. Now it's gonna get fun and spicy and very exciting. It was interesting. I was looking through everybody's homework today just to see how you guys were doing, and you guys are using a lot of embedded things or more complicated things that we hadn't really gone over yet. So good job. A lot of that is going to be covered this week when we start introducing CSS. But today we really wanted to focus on, all the things we started touching on at the end of last week in terms of HTML. We're going to dive in, specifically into each and every element that you're going to use pretty frequently, and then also show you ways to, there's a whole bunch of elements that you need to know they exist, and you need to know how to go and find where they're at so that you can use them correctly in your projects. But it's probably not worth memorizing all of the intricacies of them. Okay? Does anyone have anything from last week that they want to go over or that we want to just talk about before we dive in and start learning new stuff? Nope. All right. Onward and upward. All right. So the first thing I wanted to touch on is the structure of our documents. We talked about this very briefly last week, and we just basically said, here, let's make a new file, and we're going to call this testpage.html. Right? We talked about everything is almost always going to have a doc type. It's going to be the very first thing that's on a page. Inside that, you're almost always going to start and end your HTML document with the HTML tags. Okay, so that's the container of every HTML document you have is always going to have these 4 elements by default. Okay. Secondly, right after the top of your HTML document, you're going to begin with a head, and that head tag is going to contain. Does anyone remember what goes in a head? There's like a special nerdy term for it.
Metadata.
Metadata, exactly. So stuff about the page, not stuff in the page. So it's going to be things that describe how the page operates, how it looks, how it feels. A lot of that is going to be shoved into the head. And we're going to go over in more detail, especially as we get into CSS and JavaScript. A lot of that content from your CSS files to your JavaScript scripts, that's going to be loaded up here. The site icon that you see, like a favicon, the thing that gives a little cutesy icon in your title bar, all of that will be placed inside this head. So it's information about the page, stuff for search engines, but not stuff that's going to be displayed or rendered. Okay? And then the next major component is the body tag, right? So these 3 different types of elements, HTML, head, body, and doc type, those are the 4 components that will be on just about every page you ever build, right? This is a valid HTML website. It's got nothing on it. You can't do anything here, but this is valid and structurally correct. Okay, that's the framework. These are the bones of everything you're doing. Now, I wanted to really quickly show off a handy little feature that will save you a ton of time and energy going forward. It's built into Visual Studio Code through one of our plugins. If you press the exclamation point, and then hit the key tab, it's going to fill out a bare bones template for you. So it's going to, all that stuff that we just typed in, this is going to create it for you. And it's going to start even showing off some of the things that we haven't gone over yet, like meta character set. We were talking about UTF-8 encoding. This is telling the browser, hey, we're probably going to use some Chinese or some emoji on this page. Make sure that it's ready to handle it. It's telling you that it's compatible with Internet Explorer Edge. It's telling you that this is the size of the viewport. Please flex to fit if I'm on a small tiny browser versus I'm on a big browser on a desktop. And it's going to give you a title. So this page by itself is still going to have nothing in it except for a title, but it's giving you the content as like a structure so you get started without having to type. And again, just for reference, that is exclamation point and then you hit tab, and it's going to fill in that bare bones content for you. Okay, so a little handy shortcut just so you don't have to type a bunch of stuff that you're always going to have on every page. And it's stuff that, like, to be honest, once you've started working on a page, you're probably never going to type head again, right? Because you're inside the page now, working inside the body. So this is just a really quick way to get you up and running without too much muss and fuss. Is there any questions about the structure? We talked about always going to have a doc type, always going to have an HTML tag, always going to have a head, always going to have a body. That's the main structure. Go ahead, Andrew.
With the viewport settings right there, is that going to make it responsive to any type of screen, like phones, tablets, all that?
Great question. By default, every web page is already responsive. This is one of the places in which a lot of this will happen actually in CSS when we get into that. It's going to tell the browser where to move things. So if you've got like a 2-menu website where you got a small menu on the left and a big thing in the middle, CSS will actually say when I'm on this type of view size, like I'm on a 700 pixel wide iPhone, hide the menu and put it inside of another secret menu, and just display the main body. But let's put in some content here just so I can show this off. H1, big heading, right? And P. This is a large paragraph of text. Look at how fancy I am. Right? P. And let's actually, just to make sure that this is easy to see, let's copy a bunch of this. We're gonna have, this is gonna be a big paragraph, right? If we click our Go Live button, it is down here in the bottom, and we load this up in a browser, you can see that this is what it looks like in a browser, right? It's already full width, everything is great. One of the beautiful things about HTML and how it was designed in the first place is that they already intended it for it to be viewed on a bunch of different resolutions. So, you know, whether you got a 32-inch big monitor, or you got a tiny little monitor, or you're on a phone, if I come in here into developer tools, and we're going to definitely go over this in way more detail later on, but I just wanted to kind of show this off. There's a function down here called Toggle Device Toolbar. And when you click on this, we can see what it will look like in a Pixel 2, we can see what it'll look like in an iPad, and you can see the text and the content of this page is moving around with us as the size of the screen has changed, right? And we can even, so this is what responsive means. It just means that the content and the design will shift around. By default, you're getting this for free. Anything you're using in HTML is going to automatically try to resize itself, and we were talking about block versus inline elements last week. That is what is controlling this content. As we get into more advanced designs, as we're trying to say, hey, I always want my menu to be on the left, or I want my content to be on the right, or I want buttons to be located in the top right half of the screen, that's when CSS comes in. And if we don't intentionally make our CSS responsive, then that's the kind of thing where the button might be disappeared off the side of the page and we don't see it unless we tell it to move. But a lot of that is controlled here. But really what this is doing from a meta perspective is telling a search engine or somebody that's looking at these meta tags, like, hey, all of this content was designed for this type of screen. And there's a whole bunch of Google fancy stuff, like if we had accelerated mobile pages that we would define in here that would tell Google, hey, if it's a browser coming here, send them to this content, and if it's a phone coming here, send them to this other content. That's super advanced. Just know that all of that meta information, just like you correctly pointed out, will almost always go in the head, and all the content will go in the body. Okay? So that is the structure. Let me pull this off so it'll be ready for us to keep playing. All right. We spent a little bit of time talking about this last week. We played with these things. The typography. Typography just refers to any tag or element that talks about what the text is doing. So there are a few tags. For example, strong. That was one we learned last week. That makes something emboldened. We also learned that there's a synonym for that, which is the bold tag, /B. B, right? And we've seen what those do in action, right? We did it in our homework. We played with it. You can see that it's making this bold. We learned about the emphasis tag, right, which makes things italic. You can see that this is now italicized. We also learned that we could do that with the I tag, right? So that's kind of like an older-fashioned version of HTML. This used to be the main way. Now the preferred way is to describe what kind of change you want, because you might say that in your version of the product, whatever you end up building, emphasis means that it also needs to be blue, right? That's the sort of stuff we'll start defining inside of CSS, rather than saying this is purely italic, right? Because if you ever change italic to not be italic but blue, that would make this tag no longer semantically correct, right? That's one of the reasons we started moving away from those types of tags. We learned about striking through, right? So we can use the strike tag to write a line through this text and say, like, hey, this is no longer important, which is the exact same as if we'd done del, right? There's a del tag that says delete, right? And now you can see this one has been struck through as well. And then we learned about line breaks. So right now this is all one big paragraph of text. We learned that the way we would control line breaks, the correct way, if we wanted this to be two separate paragraphs, we'd want to really just come in here and say, this is the end of paragraph 1 and this is the beginning of paragraph 2. But if we wanted to individually control these line breaks and say, we can come in here and use the BR tag, and we can sprinkle these around wherever we want. So this is introducing those line breaks on purpose rather than relying on the P. So this is a great example of how, by default, your page design is responsive. This content was, you see it's growing and shrinking based on the size of the viewport, but putting those BRs in has, for the first time, broken that free, the stuff that comes native to the browser, line breaks. And those line breaks, even though we've added them in here, now it makes it look really weird as you start getting into smaller window sizes. If we went on an older generation iPhone 3 or iPhone 4, because we put a line break here, it is now giving us this weird line of text that floats off at the end. Whereas relying on the native ability of the browser to resize and shrink based on what it wants to do is one of the side effects of this that you always need to be aware of. We also learned about the horizontal rule, which is just giving us a line that comes through here, right? And we will learn about lots of ways to style these lines going forward. There's a resource here that gives you some really good examples of how you can style those lines. So you can make them, have a drop shadow or have, little cutesy, intricate designs here. This is stuff we're going to cover in the CSS portion later this week, but you can do a ton of things with horizontal rules in a way that makes sense from a purely document structure standpoint. Thinking of this as a document, we want to separate areas of content. We want to split them up logically so it's easy to read and there's a nice flow. Using an HR is one of the best ways we can do that, right? Because it says, this is section 1, this is section 2, give me a line break. There's a lot of ways to do this. We can manually insert a border. That's one way to go. But HR is the tag that will say, slap a line in there and keep my content, separated off. Then, you have any questions about the typography? A lot of this stuff is really the low-hanging fruit of easiness, right? Making things stronger, putting some emphasis on things, putting in line breaks. Those are really just the beginning of a document. And based on the homework that you guys have done last week, it feels like you have a pretty good grasp on this. All right. Up next, what makes it useful as a website is linking, right? Linking is the most important thing you'll do, and I really want to spend some time today to go over all of the crazy things that you can do with links, because it's not just simple links. Let's start here. So if we pull up our little page we're working on, the default is that you can come in here and say, let's put in a line break here, and let's say H2 fun with links. H2. So the default is a link itself. So we know that's the anchor tag, A, and then it's going to require an href, and then we put in a website address. So in this case, we'll do google.com, and we'll say link to Google. Right? So this is let's shrink this up a bit so everybody can see better. So you can see this says link to Google. When I save it, this is indeed a link to Google, right? That's the basics. This is the number one thing you'll probably use links for. Okay. Another thing that you're probably going to use links for, and this is kind of more complicated, right? If I come in here, let's add a line break so we go to a new line. Let's say this is a H3 internal link inside my project, right? Shrink this up a bit. So using that same exact mechanism, a href. We have a file in this project that we created last week called page2.html, right? And we learned about, we want to link to that. We've built this beautiful website. We need to be able to have navigation items. So what we can do is we can do a relative link. And a relative link is going to say, it's almost always going to start with a slash, or it's going to be empty, and it's going to just have so we could do this. We could say page2.html. This is a link to my secret page. We still close it with an A. And now if I click this link, this is loading page2.html, right? And I can go back. So this is really the strength of HTML and why it's so prevalent why the internet in this format took off is because I can have 10 or 15 different pages in my project here and link to all of them. I can have a users page. I can have a page that displays a list of prices. You know, Andrew, you were working on a like a fitness log, right? You can link to, this is May, this is June, this is July. You can link to different pages that exist inside your project. This is an internal relative link. If I had multiple folders in here, which we'll cover a little bit later today, this could be, this could have a slash in front of it, and I could have a name of a folder. So we could say this is images page 2, right? And now you can see that this, if you look down right above this area, you can see when I hover my mouse over it, it's telling me it's going to try and load images page 2. This is going to fail because that page doesn't exist because it's on the top level. So all the stuff we learned last week around navigating your file system, CDing to different directories, that same type of relationship exists inside of your web project. Right? If I was to actually make a folder in here called images, right, and I drag page 2 up into images, so I'm just moving it up there. Now when I reload this page, it loaded. So that link was correct. And the thing that makes it a relative link is that I'm not including this full http google.com. So if I was, if you can see up here on the top in my title bar here, the full website address that we're going to is 127.0.0.1, port 5500, testpage.html. That's the full path. I can just as easily come in here and say http://127.0.0.1, port 5500, images page 2. Right, and so now that link will go to that second page. You can put either the full address, but what you'll frequently do when you're a web developer is you'll just put the relative address. And the reason that's important is when you're building a project, in the real world, you're probably going to have a test server and a production server and maybe a development server. You'll be working on your computer. If I put in my production address and I was like, my main website is mainwebsite.com/images./page2, I'm here developing, and this link won't work for me because it's trying to go to mainwebsite.com. Thank goodness when I click that, it's not some kind of terrible adult website. That happens occasionally, right? So that's the difference between a relative link and like an actual permanent link, right? A fully qualified link. Okay, so that's one type. So this is these are the basics of HTML. What else can you do with links, right? So let's say, for the sake of argument, we have a page that is full of content, and so just to show this off really quickly, I'm going to copy this whole paragraph. I'm going to paste it a few times. So we've got a lot of content in here, but we want to come in here and say like, let's say we want to be able to quickly scroll back up to the top, or in a more realistic case, we want to scroll to somewhere in the middle. But for the sake of purposes here, we're going to do we're going to put in an A, and we're going to an anchor tag, and we're going to say name equals scroll to, right? And it's going to be an empty anchor tag. Okay, so it exists up here, but we're not displaying anything because we didn't put any text inside this box, right? I'm not sure if this is actually how we do it, so we're going to have to figure this out together. But what we can do is we can make a link inside the page, kind of like this. Internal link inside this page. We could say scroll to. Alright, so I use the hashtag sign, which is Shift-3. And now I'm going to change the text to say scroll up. Right? So if I look down at the bottom, this scroll up is saying, go inside this current page and take me to that scroll up element, which is all the way up here at the top. So it's kind of hard to see it really quickly because it happens immediately. But if I click this, it's taking me right to the top of that page. Right? And I can move this scroll to tag, this element, anywhere I want. Right? So I can put it at the very top. I can say scroll to. And now it's going to include the big heading because it's scrolling to that element that has the name of scroll to. If I put this in the middle somewhere, like let's put one in here. H3, scroll to this. So now, when I click on this link, it's going to scroll us to that H3 we just created. Right? You see, this hashtag, or pound sign, or whatever you want to call it, number sign, when you put a name in there with no page address, it's going to scroll us to it. This mechanism also works externally. So let's take this and let's go edit that page 2 file. Right? So I can put a link in here, link to middle part of other page. Okay? And I can go href / testpage.html, and then I could put the hashtag scroll to, right? Link to middle of other page. All right, so all I did was I made a link, and I said it needs to be / because this page 2.html is inside of a folder. So when we tell the browser we want to go to a different page, we want to have it go up. So we can show us how that works right now. This is a link to the secret page. This is going to take us to the other page right at that scroll to tag. So you can load a page and go right to a spot. You'll see this pretty often on Wikipedia. Like if there's a big page that's got a ton of content, there might be a page in the table of contents that will link you to the middle section, like early childhood years or something, if you're looking at a biography page. Have you guys seen that sort of thing before? It's almost always using this type of mechanism. Now, we're going to make this a little bit better later on when we start learning about JavaScript, because there's nice ways to scroll to it gently so the user can kind of feel that there's motion happening. But by default, it's just going to load it and go there as quick as it can. It zips you right to it. That's the default behavior. Okay. Go ahead, Leah.
So what did you like? I got the on the first page I had the link at the bottom to scroll down.
Mm-hmm.
But what else did you put? Because when I do that link.
Yeah, it's this tab right here. So it's still an anchor tag, and
Okay.
the anchor tag format is a name equals scroll to, or you can put whatever you want here. This
So
is Leah, right?
So so how do you link the two of them?
Yeah, it's with
it's a name. It's a name.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I get it.
It's just saying this is an anchor, and it has a name of whatever. And then from a different link where you have an href, you're saying hashtag or pound sign or whatever you want to call this symbol, the shift 3, right? This little thing here. That is saying, hey, look for an element that exists on this page that I'm loading with that name. If it doesn't exist, we could put scroll to fail, right? And if I click on this link, nothing's going to happen. It still says scroll to fail if you look up in the URL bar, but it didn't move. And that's because this name does not exist anywhere.
Okay.
So it's always this name, a name anchor. And the same would be true on that other page, right? I just changed this a name to scroll to fail, but page 2 just still says scroll to. So if I go to page 2, click link to another part of the page, you see it loads just at the top as if it was there. But if I went in here manually and type scroll to fail, it works as expected. This is a pretty common pattern, and you're going to see it especially in bigger documents. If you're ever working on a website that's like a blog, or it's got like a jump to comment, right? Some kind of nested hierarchy, almost always it's going to be doing this kind of mechanism behind the scenes. And we'll really dive into that pretty deeply later on in the course when we start interacting with the databases. You might have a page that has 1,000 entries on it or can grow over time. You want to provide this kind of mechanism to let you quickly, as a user, jump to that spot. So that's internal linking, right? Go ahead, Gregory. I can't quite hear you. You seem to be away from your mic.
Hey, man.
Yep.
This is the same way, for example, as Reddit, how they post their comment in the type of format to see other people's comments and to add comments.
Yeah, that's one of the ways, right? That it'll be like show the parent, and if the parent has already loaded up the page, it will let you jump to that spot, and it's almost always going to say something like, comment ID, 452 or something, right? So it's telling you jump up to comment 452. And we'll go over that later for sure. But right now you just need to be aware that this type of linking exists and how to use it, which is a combination of ahref with a hashtag, and then a name to set up what that internal reference anchor, because it really, and the reason these are called anchors is we're saying, put a little marker here. I'm going to come back to it with my document, whether it's an external document, we're anchoring to something external, or we're anchoring to something internal. Okay. Other fun links. Right? Another fun thing you can do with links is that this is regular HTML, just like everything else. So we can say ahref equals http google.com, right? We can link to something, and inside this tag we can put an image. So we can say image source equals cats.jpg, and this is a big cat picture, so let's make it a height 200, right? And we remember image tag is not self-closing, so you don't need a closing tag, but we do need to close our a tag. And so now you can see there's the cat picture exactly like we expect, but behind the scenes this is a link to Google, right? Anything that is inside this anchor tag from the start to the end tag is going to be a link. So you might have multiple things in here, right? You can do so we've got our image, but maybe we also want to put like go to Google, right? So now we can see go to Google is there as well. That's also a part of this link, right? This is all one thing. Another fun thing we can do with links, let's add a horizontal rule to keep things separate for us. We can put in buttons, right? So we can say ahref equals google.com, right? So we want to go to Google again, and we can say this is actually going to be a button, and it's going to say go to Google. So we haven't learned about the button thing. That's another form-specific command. But when you use button, it's going to give you a button. If we didn't have it wrapped in an A, this would just be a button that doesn't do anything. Right? So I could take out this anchor tag, and I could say, give me a button that says go to Google. I can click this button all day long. It's going to do nothing. But wrapping it in an anchor tag, and I'm just going to Control Z so that stuff comes back. This is now a button that goes to Google. Right? It's a real cool way of, maybe from a user interface point of view, you want to have a button on your page to go to a different page, whether it's like edit my users or create a new blog post. This is a real simple way to make a button do something without having to bring all that stuff that comes along with a form that we learned about last week. And we're going to dive way more into forms later. But a button, if you just want a button, this is the way to do it. You can make it go anywhere. Okay. One last interesting thing with links, H3, so emails. So if we want to write an email to someone, there's a magical href command that you're going to have to just know that this exists. So rather than doing https://google.com, right, we're going to do mail to. And if I say mail to, and I put an email address in here, so I can do erh@clubhouse, right? Email Eric, right? You can see it gives me a link here, and if I click it, it's going to try and open up my default email client, which I don't think I have one defined on this browser. But if I had Outlook installed here, or if I had Google set up so that it would go to the correct, let's see if I can do it on my primary. Bring up this real quick. So here I am on a real browser that has that link set up. If I click this, it's going to try and open my email client in Gmail, and it's going to send an email to erh@theclubhouse, right? So that's a pretty useful way. You're going to use this kind of format pretty often when you're building a website that says something like, contact me, click here, right? You're almost always going to use this format of mail to, whatever. If I had a Microsoft Outlook, or if I had the mail program on Mac, this link would open up that program most of the time. Whatever you have set as your default email client in your computer. Any questions about any of these link types we learned about? We're good? All right. Yep. So we learned about, yep. All right. So we learned about this quite a bit last week. You guys are probably pretty comfortable with it, so we'll just kind of go pretty quickly here. I'm going to make an H2, and this is fun with lists, right? So we learned about an unordered list, right? What is an unordered list? What is the difference between an unordered list and an ordered list?
An ordered list has like the numbers 1, 2, 3, and then an unordered list is just like dots.
Yeah, great. That's exactly right. So if I put an unordered list, UL, and I come in here and I say, have fun, align, take a nap, that's going to create a list with dots. Exactly right. We can do this exact same thing, but just replace UL with OL. So I'm going to copy this and put it down here. OL. All right, and now we've got a list that is tracked by numbers. Okay. There are a few things to be aware of with unordered lists and with ordered lists. Is that you can kind of control some of the information. So there is an attribute of an ordered list that is a start. Right. There's 2. Where we can start the counting at a different number, right? I could put start equals 200 in here, and it will start counting at 200, 201, 203, whatever we need. This is one way that we can control numerically where our list begins from. This might be useful if you've got a bunch of lists and it's like 5 pages long, and you want the numbers to follow along as you click through to page 2 and page 3. This is a way for because when you load page 2. It's going to start with an ordered list and think, well, I'm back at 1, but really you're at 200, right? If you had 100 per page. So this is the way you would do that and control how that is displayed. Yeah, I guess we can cover some of this list style stuff now. This is something that we're going to learn a lot more about in CSS later on. But if we go to Google and we say list style type. These are some of the options specifically for unordered lists that we're going to let us control how our lists look like. So how we would do this is by default, it's going to use list style type disk. So if I come in here and I say style equals boop, right? When I come into this page, you're going to notice nothing has changed, right? It's still a dot. This is a disk. If I come in here and I say I want to make this square, right? So we can type in square in here. Now you see it's a little square. It's kind of hard to read maybe. You see it's a little tiny square. There's a whole bunch of different styles that your browser is going to know by default. Decimal is the ones, right? So I can take a UL and say decimal, right? And now I've got an ordered list made up of an unordered list, right? And I can do the same over here with the ordered list. I can say style equals list style type disk, right? And now my ordered list is using disks. So behind the scenes, and we kind of looked at this last week, and we kind of looked at it a little bit today, where we've got things like the bold tag versus the strong tag. By default, it's doing this behind the scenes. It's saying display the list style as a square or as a circle or as a number. It's the difference between a paragraph tag and a div. Like, it's the same root element, and all that has changed is the default display or appearance that CSS is going to apply to it. When we get into CSS later this week, you're going to find that just about everything in the entire browser in the HTML thing can be overwritten or changed or modified. You can make div tags that behave exactly like tables. You can make tables that act like paragraphs or buttons if you want to, right? Lots of things can be overwritten. Go ahead, Leah.
It's not really a question, but I think it's a little strange how like they change from saying like bolds and italics to like strong and emphasis. They changed from that to get away from like the graphical stuff. because that's more of a CSS thing. But yeah, they like let you like they specify like square and like disk and stuff.
Yeah.
It's just kind of strange.
It's a great observation. A lot of the things in CSS are descriptive of how it's going to look and appear. HTML, and this was like a huge discussion for like most of the 2000s, was should our documents describe what it looks like or should it just describe the content itself? And I think for the most part this document should describe the content itself and not how it looks. That side of the argument won. And CSS is really one of the major results that came out of that, which is we're going to give you a different language that describes how the document looks, and that's why you see a lot of these terms like this is a disk, this is a square, because CSS is the correct place to describe the look and feel of your content. HTML is just supposed to describe this is what the document is, this is the content, this is a section, this is a paragraph.
Oh, so when it's saying like style equals, that's a CSS thing. That's
This,
not HTML.
yeah, this is all CSS.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so anything, we're touching on that now just for the purposes of this. This is still the incorrect way by like semantic standards, and I say that with air quotes, of styling your content. Your CSS really belongs in a style sheet that is defined in the head and loaded in as a separate file. That's where all your CSS really truly belongs. However, this is an attribute that exists on elements that lets us quickly style anything we want, right? So the real way, if we were actually writing CSS, imagine this was CSS up here, I would say every UL element, I want to have a list style type decimal. And if that file exists in the CSS thing, every UL on this page is going to look that way. The style attribute lets me pick one and do something different with it. So it's not, as you work with projects and stuff, we're going to use this inline attribute method to like help us debug and troubleshoot. That's like the best tool in the world. I can be like, yo, why is this over here? Let me put a border around it. I can say border 1px solid green, right? And now you can see it's got a border around it. So if I was messing with margin or padding or trying to figure out why this was moving things down, going into the style attribute and just saying like, hey, with this specific element, change something so I can visually see it, that's going to be your best friend forever. But in general, yeah, it's best practice, and especially as you guys enter your first job, if you're designing your first web page for your company and you're putting in a bunch of style information inside these style equals, they're probably going to reject your pull request and be like, this belongs in this CSS sheet, right? But for the purposes of learning and playing around with, especially later in this week before we really learn about how CSS is super powerful, we'll use this attribute all the time, just to play with and see how things work. Yeah, great. Good question then. So we can change all these list style types using this CSS, list style type equals, right? So there is no difference aside from what we're telling so we were talking a minute ago about the structure of our document and what it means to be semantic. If I come in here and I say, this is an unordered list, but I make the list style type decimal, I have just lied about that content to the browser. I've said, this is a list I don't care about the order in, but then we go and put numbers on it. And the same is true of the ordered list. We're saying this ordered list matters. The numbers and the sequence is important. But if we change it to a disk, now we've just lied, right? And so, nothing's going to happen to you if you lie. I mean, the browser is still happy to render it incorrectly. But if I'm a screen reader or if I'm some document in the future that is trying to parse out the intent of what you're doing, we've just lied about our intent. And to me, that's what makes HTML super powerful. It's us saying, here's a document, here's the structure of the document in the sense that I think these elements are important. This is a paragraph. This is a heading that's a level 1. This is a heading that's a level 6. It's not as important. We're talking about the importance of our content, not how it's supposed to be displayed necessarily. All right, so we played with some unordered lists. Let me just take this out here so we don't have lies in our documents. So I'm going to change this back to, I'm just going to take it all up. Right. We can have an empty attribute here, right? So right now it says style equals nothing. It's going to add no new styles to this. It took out the border. It changed them back to their default behaviors. Okay. Having an empty attribute is not a problem. Though this little quick reference in Visual Studio is saying like, don't have an empty attribute. So it's giving us a little squiggly warning. You can ignore that at your own peril. Or do whatever you want. All right. So those are lists. Anything else important? Emmet. I don't know what Emmet is. Oh, that's if we installed a plugin. Any questions with list styles and how to change the behavior? There's a whole bunch of different options here. This is a bad website reference. Let's go to W3 Schools. These are all the different options you have available to your disposal. You can make lowercase alpha. You can use Greek letters. You know, if you want to do like alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon, right? Someone had a question?
Yeah. So what will we primarily use lists for? Like sidebar menus for links?
Yeah. That's a great question. I have, for the most of my life, used them either for like lists of links, like menus, either in the sidebar or in top navigation, or in the footer, right, where it's like a list of links. Sometimes I've used them in products where it's like a to-do list. So I'll often create like an ordered list like this, and say these are my attributes. Well, let's put like 6 things in here, right? So this is an ordered list, and then what I'll do is through CSS and JavaScript, I might turn these into individual cards that have a ton of spacing, and maybe drag them between columns. It's still a list. HTML structurally, it's saying this is my to-do list, and I might have a list that is over on the left that says to do, and then a list in the middle that says working, and then a list on the right that says done. And I will have list items that are styled to be like a pretty card, and drag them between lists using JavaScript and CSS. So structurally, anytime I can think of like this is a list of items, almost always I'm going to use a list. Whether it ends up looking like this or not, that's a completely different story. And might be a fun project to play with as we move a little bit further along, right? Because I can come in here. Let's have a quick example, right? Let's say I'm in here. So I've made myself a little style sheet. Normally this would be, a file that is up at the top, and I'm going to say, inside an ordered list, any li is going to have a border 1px solid. Right, give it a light gray border. I'm going to say margin 5px, right? And cursor equals red, right? Oh, that's class. Well, right. So now let's make this inline. Alright, so now I've got a list of items that I could theoretically, my browser, because I use cursor equals grab, is showing as a hand. And, my first reaction would be I want to click this and move it somewhere, right? So that's the sort of thing you can do with lists. As you get a little bit further along in the journey of this class, it doesn't have to be just like an up and down list of items. You can make it a horizontal list. You can make it a vertical list. You can make it a list of boxes that I'm going to drag around a page. But to me, the question would be, is this intended behind the scenes to be a list of items, right? And if the answer is yes, use a list. Great question. We also used it, you might want to use it for a list of, like a to-do list of checkboxes, so you might integrate it with a form, kind of how we were playing with Markdown the other day. We might have a list where you can come in and add an item, and as soon as you click a check, it does a strike through, and it says this one's done. We'll be able to do that kind of interactivity, especially later on when we start learning JavaScript and integrating it with our web pages. But over here, the important thing to note is in any type of list, there's a whole bunch of list styles that you can use by default. the browser is smart enough to know, like, hey, I want to have Greek letters. It will count up Greek letters for you. Or you could use Greek Roman numerals, right? So it could be like I, right? I-I-V. Whole bunch of choices. Any questions on lists? Awesome. You guys get it. All right. Before we move on to another type of list, like description list, because that's a little bit different. Probably gonna take a 5-10 minute break. So go get a drink, get a refreshment, and we'll meet back at 6 o'clock. Okay. Cool. All right. Well, I'll see you all at 6 o'clock. All right, we are live. Let me present this screen. All right, cool. It's important to note, as a software developer, just like with everything else, we've been working for about an hour, right? What do we want to do? We want to check in our work, right, so that we don't lose it in source code. So I ran get status. We can see that we deleted page 2, which used to exist in the top level. It added a folder, and we've made some changes. Test page.html is new. We can do this either by going here and going get add dot, or we can come up here and add everything that is staged over on the left through our source control, and we can just say new page, click the checkbox, and then push. Okay. So just to verify now, we can say get status, and everything's up to date. So it's a good habit to get in. If you step away for a minute, I should have done it before we left for break, right? My cat could come in and delete all my work, and I'd be like, oh no, right? Stranger things have happened, and if you do this, 20 plus years, I guarantee you they'll happen to you, right? So get in the habit of committing frequently and often. All right, so we learned about some list style types. We played with a few of them. Another thing that is interesting to note before we move on from ordered lists and unordered lists is that we have the ability to nest lists inside of lists, and you're going to use this pretty often as well, especially when you're using lists for this type of thing, right? If it's actually, I'm trying to display a list of things, you might have subtasks. So if this was a list of tasks, let's say it starts at 1, right? Maybe list 2, right? The way we would add a sub list is we can say take a nap, and we can come in here and say OL. Right, so we'll make another ordered list. It has to be inside the list element, the li, but we can make another list in here. We can say li for at least an hour, li no more than 2 hours. And now what we'll have is the browser is smart enough to say, hey, this is a second list that starts inside this list, and you can see it preserves the counting. So it goes 1, 2, and then 1, 2 for the subtasks, and then it goes right back to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So we could have, we could have 5 things in here. We could say bring a pillow, right? And we'll see it keeps counting without us having to do anything. You can have sub lists, right? So I can come in here and say bring a pillow, and I can come in here and say this is a UL, right? I'm going to say this is an unordered list, and I'm going to say let's make it not too hard, not too soft. Right? So we can use this to describe sub item 3. We can build any kind of structure we want and nest things out more fully. When we get into like starting to develop with JavaScript, this is like a really fun first or second project to start working on. It's like, let's make a to-do list creator, right? Because you can imagine the interactivity here. We just got a list of items. I should be able to add a new list item at the end. I should be able to mark something as done, and I should be able to make sub-lists, right? You can put in any number of instructions. You were asking earlier about like what types of things would we use lists for? One of the big ones, if you're ever working on this type of project, would be like a recipe website where it's like step 1, set the oven to 300 degrees. Step 2, start making butter sauce, and then step 2.1 would be like, put in 5 ounces of garlic, 10 ounces of butter, mix it over medium heat, right? Lists are perfect for that because it's a list of steps. You'll almost always see, A recipe website probably has both of these kinds used pretty frequently. So they'll have a list of ingredients that is an unordered list up at the top, and then you'll have the steps, which is an ordered list, and it says go step 1, step 2, step 3. You'll see this in programming tutorials when you guys start experimenting with learning more on your own in the future, right? They'll say step 1, create a blank HTML website. Step 2, add in a title, right? It'll walk you through the steps, and that's pretty common. So that's nested lists, right? You can nest as many as you want. You can even come in here and change the styles of things. So we can come in here and say like list style equals list style type. And let's go pick a fun one, shall we? So we're going to go to W3 schools and we're going to look at that list. Let's say we want to make it, we want it to be Roman numerals. So we'll say lower Roman, lower dash Roman. Right? And now if we look at our list, we can see that it's using Roman numerals now to count through our list instead of 1, 2, 3. But it still goes back to 3, 4, 5, 6 because this is the only, the nested one, the child, is the only one that has that style on it. Right? So this is infinitely powerful. You can mix and match lists to your heart's content. We were talking about using this for menus before. This could be a menu of navigation elements, and then this is a submenu. And we'll learn how to make this submenu hidden until you click it later on when we start learning about CSS and JavaScript. But that's extremely common. So you can have entire directories of menus hidden in here inside of a bunch of unordered lists. Okay? Everyone following along with nested lists. Great. This is super powerful. The next type, I just want to briefly cover it because I think in my 20 years I've used it maybe twice. And that's a definition list. So how does this go? DT, DL, right? DL is a definition list. And what you put in is instead of having an LI, it uses a DT. And a DT is the definition, right? So I can put in like the word fun / DT. And then right below it, we'll have DD, which is definition description. And this would be like the word fun means programming. Right? And it just gives you this kind of structure. Why we would use this semantically is if I'm building a list of terms, if I'm working on a paper that needs to have a glossary, and explain, scientific papers are a great example of this, or if you're working on a website that has information that is specific to a product you're working on, like a database that is special to your team, you probably want to use this type of structure to correctly define these, because if a search engine or someplace is coming here, they're going to read this and say, hey, DT, the word fun, means DD, whatever's inside this DD tag. Now, like I said, I use this so sparingly that I think I've used it 2 or 3 times. But you should be aware that this is another type of list that the browser knows what to do with. Great for definitions, great for terminology, and that's really its main benefit. Cool. And then we'll just give this a little tag here so we know H3 definition list. And so you could put in multiple definitions in here. So we would come in here and say DT boring. DT, let's say like pigs and chickens are boring. And so it's really just going to run down and make a glossary here for you with a term followed by a description. Okay? Excellent. All right. We started playing with this last week, but it's time to go in more depth. First, we'll start with images. So let's make a new H2 big section. We'll say images and media. Right. H3 images. All right, so you can see how I'm using HTML here to start to define a structure and flow to this fake document we're working in. I'm going to make a top-level section called images and media, and then I make a subheading that says images, and we're going to learn about that now. So the way we learned last week is image, and then source equals cats.jpg. All right, that was the basic thing that we learned. It's a tag. It doesn't need to be closed. There's no content that goes into it other than attributes. So if I do this, we can see it loads this giant cat image. Does anyone remember how I make this cat image smaller or not take up the full width of the screen with an attribute?
By adjusting the width, so you would add width equals and then like 50% or something.
Width equals, let's try that, 50%. Yep, that definitely worked. What are some other attribute values you can put in here? We can also put in like an actual physical length, right? So 50, I think this defaults to pixels. We'd have to look. Let's look. So to look at this, right? Because I don't want to tell you guys something incorrect. Let's go to W3 Schools, right? We're already there. Let's go to, we'll just look for the image tag. And the first result tells you, it's got the height and the width. Let's see if, yeah, it tells us. So that's by default the height in pixels. So if I say 50, it's going to make a tiny little 50 pixel wide image. If I say 50%, it's going to do 50% of the total available pixels for the page. That's what makes it responsive, right? So if we're in this, 50 is hard, right? If I resize my screen, that image is not going to change. But if I change this to 50%, like Estrella originally requested, it's half the screen. And if I shrink the screen, the image shrinks with it, right? Pretty cool. So that's an excellent way. You can also, as I think I mentioned last week, you can also specify height, right? So now it's still doing 50% of the height. Let's make it 50 again. So it's making it 50 pixels high, and then it's automatically saying, okay, well, this image is, let's say it's 100 images wide and 100 images, 200 images tall. If I make it 100 images tall, it's going to take that width and divide it by 2. So it's going to maintain that aspect ratio. You guys are probably familiar with aspect ratios in the terms of like a television, where it'll be like 16 by 9 or 4 by 3 used to be like the old CRT tube TVs. That ratio just means the relationship between height and width. So when we want to have an image that is giant and we want to have it constrain itself to a smaller area, we want to just set one of these, because if I set both and I come in here and I say width equals 300, right? Now it's going to distort. It's stretching it out, right? Sometimes you want to do that, but most of the time you probably don't. So just remember that setting one of these is good. Setting two of these is bad unless you want to actually go in and figure out the aspect ratio yourself. Okay? Let's make this 100 so we have a pretty cats that we can see everywhere. Right. Let's make it 200. Right, so we got cats, images. So what are some other attributes that we have to, what's the one that we always want to include all the time? Does anyone remember?
The alt.
Yeah. And alt just stands for alternate text. So if my picture doesn't load for whatever reason, if I'm pulling it off the internet and it, Google breaks, there will still be some description here that tells us this was supposed to be a picture of cats. So I can say alt equals pretty cat examples, right? And so now that's there. We can't see it, but it's there. Another thing that is really common, and this tag or this attribute you'll use all over the place. I use it all the time on everything. It's the title attribute, right? So if I say title, pretty cat examples title, right? What the title attribute does is if I hold my mouse over this, you can see a little gray box pops up that says pretty cat example title. Title is just some nice feature that was added like a decade or so ago that says, hey, whenever someone mouses over this, pop up some text. With images, oftentimes I'll make those match. The alt and the title will be the same, but that's not necessarily always the case. Sometimes you want the alt text to be more descriptive for a screen reader, and you want the title to just be like cat pictures, right? They don't have to be the same, but the stuff that's in a title will pop up. The stuff that's in alt will only show up if the cat image is not showing, or if I'm on a screen reader. So if I put this to like not cats, right? Now I see pretty cat examples. The title still pops up if I hover my mouse over it. So you can see pretty cat examples title here. But pretty cat examples, the alt text shows up when the image is broken, or if I was on a screen reader. Now there was a good question today in Slack, and I just want to briefly go over this. We were talking about, I forget who it was that asked, but the question was, how do you make your links in here smaller? In our early examples, we were linking to full images that we found on Google somewhere, and it was like googleimages.com/whatever, big long thing, and it was taking up a ton of space in your text editor. Now, you can link to images that way, as we've shown you. You can link to you can pull in a cat picture from anywhere on the planet, right? But most of the time when you're developing, you're almost always going to have the image inside your folder that is referenceable with your project. So just like with hyperlinks, almost always you're going to use a relative path. Okay, so just like we have here. I just did /cats.jpg, which means it exists in this folder. And so it's just going to load it here. So I've never heard of anyone asking for, how do you make that shorter? I'm sure there's probably a way that exists, but I've never had to do it, because most of the time your images are going to look like this. And so now's a great point of talking about folder structure. This is just a time to like introduce you to the concept, is that most of the time when you're working on a website project, you're almost always going to have 3 folders in the top level. And it's going to be images. You're going to have a folder called CSS, and you're going to have a folder called JavaScript or JS. Okay. Now, what those folders, CSS might actually just say styles. It might be named styles. JS might actually be named JavaScript or scripts. Images might be named images fully spelled out like this, or it might be renamed to like image, right? That is going to entirely depend on who was responsible for making your project in the first place. If you go to your first job, they might have different names for these folders, but almost always they're going to be kept in a folder. So when you're working with, let's move our cat's picture into our image folder. And I'm going to rename that folder images because I like that better. Images, right? So almost always we've got an images folder now with the cat's picture in it. When I'm working with images inside my product or whatever I'm building, it's almost always going to be images/cats. And so now this image will load perfectly because it's referencing that specific file, that picture file that is in this specific folder. Can you guys kind of see the relationship between these types of paths and what we were learning in the console as well when we're seeding around and we're using .. and like it's identical. We're referencing something by a path. This part of this is the path. This is the file name inside the path. Okay, and we'll start to explore that with JavaScript as well, because you're going to start to you're going to get that out of the URL as well, right? So I can come in here and behind the scenes, all that's happening when we reference our picture that way is this little web server here. When we get to this image tag, it's saying, give me that picture. And so the web server is serving cats.jpg. So it's just sending back this file. Now the browser's taking this big file and shoving it into the constraints that we put in our HTML, which in this case was height 200. But behind the scenes, it's serving all these things. Is everybody tracking along with that? Cool. What is up next for us? All right. Yep. So we learned about this briefly last week, but I'm going to touch on the 2 main ways you're going to embed video on your website. I'm sure you're going to get a client that's going to want video. There's a couple more ways we might actually explore a little bit later, but for the most part, I pull up my code here. Right. So let's go in here. We made H3 images, and we're going to say H3 videos. Right? The first one is the iframe version that we got from YouTube, right? So this would be us going to YouTube, and we would say we want to embed, what was our URL that we had for the class? CBC 12, create copy link. So we're going to this, let's go to day 4. We're going to have our HTML video in here. There we go. Pause it so it doesn't play. That's annoying. And if we expand this out, we click the share button and embed, it's going to give us this code to start the page, right? So if I put this code right here, iframe width equals 560, height equals 315, source equals YouTube embed whatever, it's giving you a title, YouTube video player, right? So as we just learned about the title command, if I come in here and I hover over this, it should, in theory, I guess it's not because we're using it's inside of an iframe, but in theory that title command would make it so that if I hovered over this, it would pop up YouTube video player. It's saying we don't want a border around this, and then it's telling you to, this attribute is telling you to allow using accelerometer. So if you're on a mobile device, it would flip the screen size if you switch the orientation. It's telling it to autoplay, clipboard right, encrypted media, gyroscope, picture-in-picture, allow full screen. All of these commands are telling this video how to play. And YouTube has graciously, when we went to YouTube, given us all this code. We don't have to think about it. Okay? But let's experiment with some of this stuff, just because it's kind of fun. So let's come back here. Right? We saved it. Our video exists. Right? I can click play, it will play it. But let's say we don't want to allow people to turn this full screen. So let's say, nope, I want them to watch it always inside my website. I don't want them to be able to click that button. So if I load this now it says full screen is unavailable. So far this week we've... Oh, there's my voice again. That's annoying. So those are the kinds of things you can do with YouTube's specific video player, but you're going to see the exact same type of embed code on Vimeo, some of these other video providers. Facebook, I'm sure, has an embed option. Twitch. They're almost always, if they want you to embed their video content, which is 99% of what you'll probably do with video, that'll be the way to do it. Okay. But let's say, we'll just change this to H4, and we'll say this is the embedded video method. H4, right? But let's say we've got a file, just like we have cat images, and we say H4 locally hosted file. H4. We want to load a file off of our server and not off of YouTube, right? Let's go find a. I think there's a few examples in here where we can find some files for the sake of, yeah. Let's just go find a quick MP4 video, free, right? Okay. Free stock videos, right? We're gonna pick this website, and we're gonna find, that's a pro video. Okay. So we're gonna download this just for the sake of examples, free download. Great. So I just downloaded this video file. What we're going to do to make use of it is, it's here in downloads, right? And it's still downloading, 16 minutes left. Sheesh. Video files are big, huh? We'll let it just download in the background. We're going to make a new folder, right? So we got images folder, we got a CSS folder, we got a JavaScript folder. Let's make a new folder called videos, right? And when that image is, when that video is done downloading, which appears to be going slow as can be, molasses, that's 10 minutes. We're going to put it into that folder. And how we're going to reference this and embed it on our page is we're going to use the video tag. Now, this is something that is relatively new. It is not a tag that has existed for forever, so let's just look it up on W3 Schools and see how to use it, right? It's going to tell us everything we need to know about the video tag. So if I just search for HTML5 video, it's going to show us an example. And these are the things that you need to include. Now, it's important to note that it's showing you two different things, source movie.mp4 and source movie.ogg. Different browsers and different computers will be able to read different types of video files. So if you pick something like MP4 and you don't provide a .ogg, someone joining on a Mac might not be able to view that file. So one of the struggles, and you can kind of see it with the size of this video, is that videos are generally pretty big, and so if you've got all these files that you're putting on your server, you not only have to have the main file, you have to have multiple versions of that file to be able to support all the different browsers and clients. Second problem is that they're bandwidth intensive. So as you're sending these big files, from the end user's perspective, I'm just streaming 200 megs, but from your back end perspective, you might be paying for thousands of dollars of server hosting fees, right? It's almost always better to just let YouTube or some of these other sites handle all the craziness, because of the unexpected. Like if your website, for example, all of a sudden gets hit with an unexpected amount of traffic, you wrote an article that was very popular, you might go from 100 visitors a day to 20,000 visitors today just overnight. And if you're hosting your videos yourself, then this would be a big challenge for you, because your server hosting bill might go from $100 a month to $10,000 a month just in the span of a few hours. So it's important to know that you can do this way. And I have in the past worked on products that used embedded videos like this to do special things. So if one great example is we built a product that you guys ever remember reading Choose Your Own Adventure books? Where you can like, hey, if you're on here, go to page 2, right? One thing you can do with this that is really powerful, and there are companies now that provide this functionality, is you can have a whole bunch of video clips, and at the end of the video clip, it'll be like, do you want to enter the room or leave the room? And depending on what the user picks, it loads a different video file, right? So you can do all kinds of really cool things programmatically when you're hosting and controlling the flow of videos yourselves that you can't easily do with YouTube or using some of these other third-party sites. You can also do some stuff, and we might learn about this in the JavaScript portions of the class. Because this is HTML5, you can control some of this with JavaScript, and you can control some of this with CSS. So we can put and overlay content into the video. So if you wanted to have subtitles or special text, or you wanted to put a logo on the page, these are the types of things you can do when you're self-hosting like this, as opposed to just letting YouTube do its own thing. Let's see if our video has finished filing yet. I'm going to copy this code so we don't lose it. It's got 10 more minutes. What a terrible example. I should have downloaded this during the break. But from here, essentially, if the video existed, we would just put source. We're going to want to put in the path to the video. So we're going to store ours in videos, and we'd call it girl video.mp4. And source, the type is video mp4, right? It's telling us what type of video file this is. Now, the other example that W3 Schools provide us was OGG. That's an open source video format. And so generally you want to have 2 or 3 different formats in here, unless you can completely control your browser environment. So if you're building a video product for one specific customer, and you can tell them this will only work on Internet Explorer or this will only work on Chrome, then you can just get away with doing one. But if you want it to be capable of handling any device the internet throws at you, any users anywhere on the World Wide Web, then you'd want to have multiple types. But in our case, we will not. OGG, right? And the type just tells the browser, hey, I understand what OGG is, so it's going to load this one instead of this one, or vice versa. Now, the other interesting thing to note is if the user comes to it with an older browser that doesn't recognize this format at all, there's fallback text that can be like, sorry, your browser does not support this video. Right? So this is kind of like the alt text of videos in that if my browser can't handle this, it's going to go ahead and display that. That goes inside the video tag. So it will display it if I don't have a video player for that. Does everyone get it? Sweet. All right. What do we want to learn about next? I think we're going to probably talk about audio. Let me pull up our sheet here. Yeah. And if that video ever finishes downloading, we'll see it in action. Yeah, audio. All right, cool. So audio is going to look very similar, right? These are all HTML5 tags that were recently added over the last decade or so. A lot of this is new. Back in the old days, you used to use Flash. I'm sure you remember. Flash is required to view this player, right? YouTube started out as Flash player. Because video and audio has become such an important part of the web experience, modern browsers have added to the HTML specification the audio and video controls. So those are tags that are specific to HTML5, but most modern browsers will be able to, Safari, Internet Explorer, Edge, Chrome, Firefox, they're all going to be able to handle this type of content. But if you go into a corporate environment, you're working on, some industries like oil rigs or manufacturing, they might have a computer that's running Windows 2000 still, right? So you always have to be aware of the limitations of the technology you really just want to know what your customers have available to them, right? You might think, I've got this great idea for a beautiful product. They might be using an old version, and it's just not worth it for them to upgrade their system. So just be aware of that. So if we're here, and we'll pull up our page again. So, we've been using W3 Schools today to kind of go over some of the esoteric aspects of some of these tags. This is one of the best friends you'll ever have, especially, we talked about it last week. HTML, CSS, some JavaScript, if you ever get into PHP, Python, Like this is a really good resource for you to use to like look up how to do something, right? So if I click the search box here and I say audio, it's going to give you a description of all the different attributes, how to use it. It's going to give you an example, which will take you straight to like a little code pen type of thing, so that it can show you, hey, if our code is like this, horse.ogg, horse.mp3, oh gosh, that played super loud, right? So all that stuff that you can do with this element, you can play with inside a little sandbox right here, right? So you don't always have to write things locally, and if you're just trying to see like, what is it going to look like? What is it going to sound like? How do I use it? You know, a great example is if we did not put horse.ogg and horse.that here, we take it out, right? It should, I click the run button, right? It's still showing the controls, but it's now showing that there's no file that's been loaded. If I paste this in here and I click run again, so let's see if we can figure out which one of these our computer is running. So we support OGG, so that's still working. Let's take out OGG and see if we support, yeah, MP3. Yeah, so Google Chrome, in this example, just playing with it here for a few seconds, we know that either one of those file formats we can run perfectly. If I had access to a computer that was old, you know, and was running Internet Explorer 7 or something, it might not render this at all, and it would display this, your browser does not support this element message. So W3 Schools is an excellent resource specifically for this. It's going to describe the element. It's going to tell you how it works. So controls, for example, adds the audio controls. So if we come back in here, we can take out this option and click the run button, and you'll see that those don't even, nothing shows up anymore. There's no controls. Even though it's loaded those files behind the scenes, those aren't there. But I'd be willing to bet, and maybe you want to plug your ears or something, because if I put in autoplay right here, click save. See, it's playing that horse sound behind the scenes invisibly with no controls, which is a terrible user experience. So we're going to take that out and take out autoplay, so that we're in charge of when we click play, and we have the ability to adjust our volume. What else does it give us access to? Do we have the ability to? Yeah, see here it's telling you this audio element is available in Chrome 4, Internet Explorer 9. So if we use Internet Explorer 8, right, which there's a lot of hospitals and a lot of places you might do work for that are using Internet Explorer 8 still. Firefox 3.5, Safari 4. If you're working on an old Mac, you might not be able to use this. And then Opera 10. So this type of browser support function is one of the best uses of W3 Schools. If you're ever trying to do something cool and neat, just make sure you can do it with who's going to be using it. And then it's telling you the different formats that the browser supports. So like OGG, Safari will not be able to read that. So if you don't have an OGG, or if all you have is an OGG, you're going to want to create an MP3 or a WAV file, right? It's just letting you know what file types are supported. So let's, where would we find some sounds? Let's see. Free stock audio sounds, right? So we're just going to try and find some sound effects that we can pull into our product real quick. That's 6 seconds long. Sheesh. Oh, our video finally downloaded. So let's move, before we move on to audio, let's move this girl image into our videos folder. And we need to rename it to girl video. Right? Was that what we called it in our code? Girl video, yeah. And so if I save this now, I load our page, we should see, yeah, oh gosh. So it's doing the same thing that image is doing, right? We want to set a height and a width here. So let's set height equals 200. Right. So now we have a little image here. And it's not playing for some reason. So let's take this out. See if we can troubleshoot our image. So let's see if maybe we add controls in here as an attribute. And there we go. Now we have the ability to play, pause, do whatever, right? So we can watch this video of this dark-haired girl blinking. Another option, and this is really powerful for video specifically, I'm sure you've seen websites where you load it and up at the header is a giant moving background. That's the kind of thing that you would use your own video control for. So you might come in here and say, no controls, but autoplay equals true, and then maybe even loop. Right? So that's going to tell it to just play over and over again forever behind the scenes. So With videos and with audio, we've learned that you have an autoplay option, an autoplay attribute. We've learned about the loop attribute, and we've learned about the controls attribute. If you put controls in there, the browser is going to give you play, volume, buttons, all those sorts of things. It even includes a download option, so I can download this file directly to my computer, right? And that happens super fast because this is a local server instead of someplace on the internet, right? Picture in picture, so that's pulling it out of the browser, right? So if I went to a different page, I'd still be able to watch this video behind the scenes. So it's a pretty robust video player with some pretty cool power to it. Especially if you're building something that's like an educational platform. If I was going to build a course that would teach you how to program, I might have our video up and let you work along with exercises in a code editor like a CodePen, so you can watch and learn at the same time as try and experiment, right? There's a lot of power here. And knowing when to use YouTube versus when to use your own video, to me the question comes down to, do I need to do anything fancy with the video? And do I care about bandwidth costs and storage? That's really the key deciding factor. Any questions about video? Because audio is going to be mostly the same. We can come in here and say H4 audio, H4. We can say audio, right? Controls, audio. And we can come over to this website we were playing around with. Let's find, yeah, that's fine. We'll get this little ball bouncing .wave. Oh, you'd have to log in to download it. But if we had a video file or an audio file, we would use it the same sort of way. We'd come in here and say source equals audio, right? If we wanted to make an audio folder, and it could be like laughing .wave type. What do they want us to do with audio files? Audio MP. Right. And the source element for both audio and video is one that does not require a closing tag. So it's just like the image tag. It's just like some of the input types that we've learned about yesterday. Input type text doesn't require a tag at the end. That's audio. Any questions about audio or video? Man, we're breezing through it today. Tonight we're gonna play Kahoot for the first time. We're gonna learn. We're gonna review all the HTML stuff we've learned to date in a fun game. So I'm excited about that. All right. When you're building websites, especially as you start in your portfolios, there's a few resources to be aware of. Almost always, you're going to want to use stock photography, stock backgrounds, things like that, where people have graciously donated, really good photography and really good images for you to use in your products. This list is going to change and evolve all the time, but almost always what I'll do is I'll say free stock backgrounds, right? And yeah, it's taking me to Pexels, which is the top result. And it's got 100,000 plus options of things I can add to my web page, right? And it's free for you to use these. There are other websites, especially when you start working in a corporate environment. A great example is we were launching a special website for the coronavirus pandemic. And so we wanted to have a really big hero image that showed a person working in a grocery store. And so we went to a paid stock website, paid like $50 for a really high quality image that we could use inside of our content. The free stock images are really good, but oftentimes when you want to get really explicit and say, this is exactly the type of image I want, whether it's like woman working in a grocery store pushing a cart, right? You probably can't find something like that for free, but if you go to some of these places like Getty Images or some of these other premium stock photography sites, those will exist, and you'll be able to find them and include them on your content, but generally it will require some kind of fee. But more often than not, in a work environment, you're going to use the specific image that you're looking for, and you're going to pay for it. I'm just working on my portfolio website, or I'm working on a project for myself. If I need an image, I'm going to use a free one, and I'm always going to search Google, and I'm going to look around here. So if we were looking for computer, right? Let's just say computer picture, right? I'm sure you've seen a lot of websites that'll have this as a heading, and it'll be like a guy typing on a computer or a nice background like this. And a great example is my own website, ericharrison.info. Right? This is just a stock image of a dunes, but I like the way it looked. Right? I didn't pay for that. It was a free stock image. But you're going to need to have that kind of resource at your fingertips, especially as you're designing and building out websites and applications on your own. There's a bunch of places that provide free stock music. I don't encourage or recommend installing music onto your websites. That trend died out in the early thousands when when we all moved off of MySpace. But if for whatever reason you wanted to add music to your website, make sure that you have the right to do so, because there's nothing worse than Metallica suing you because you put Enter Sandman on your webpage. Right? Any questions about audio, video? We learned about a bunch of list types today. We went really far in depth with anchor tags and how to link to pages externally and internally. What would you guys like to go over for the rest of the day? Tomorrow we're going to start diving into some more complicated HTML stuff and then start drifting into CSS. And then the rest of the week is just going to be styling our HTML. So I don't want to move too far ahead without giving us plenty of time to play and digest with what we've learned today. And we can go over stuff from last week as well, right? Like, I know we all had a long weekend. If you guys want to talk about Git again or anything, now's the time. Yes, Gregory.
Can you hear me?
What was that?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
You state truthfully you don't you advise us not to get customer with studio. I'm trying to remember why.
I don't really know what you're asking.
You might be used to the studio because it's take away when they ask you to when you get a job interview and they ask you how will you do something in Git.
Mm-hmm.
He said don't get comfortable using studio.
Yeah. Because when you go to an interview and you've got a software engineer in front of you and they're asking you questions of like, how do you check something into version control? The answer is not, I click on this in Visual Studio. The answer is git add, git commit, git push, right? That's officially what's happening. You might go work in a working place that does not use Visual Studio. You still have to be able to use Git. So learning the tool, well, that's always like, if I encourage you on one thing, it's always get really, really good with your tools because you're going to work on it 8 hours a day. You know, I think last week I pasted a Git cheat or a Visual Studio cheat sheet. You need to start getting really comfortable with the shortcuts, and they're all hidden under menus. So it'll be like settings is control comma. That takes me right to settings. Control N opens a new tab, right? Knowing and having familiarity with your tools is really important, but in the context of knowing what's happening behind the scenes, especially for something as fundamental as version control, it's very important that if you get dropped in a terminal thing and you're working on a server, you need to be able to say, what has changed? What needs to be checked in, right? We've got all this stuff in here that has changed. We added a cat picture, we added some videos, some images, so we want to git add dot. Oh man, it's adding all those binary files. That was stupid. I should have done that. All right, so now if we see git status, we've got the cat picture. I'm going to take out, right? So I'm going to git restore staged videos. Oh gosh. Videos girl video.mp4 because I do not want to check in this big video into my version control. Right? Yeah. So now if I do git status, it's going to show me that I've got test page and cats. Those have been moved around and edited. But I'm going to git commit -m finalized my web page.
So git dot add all your files that you modify.
Yep, everything from the current directory on down is going to add it, right? Because dot means current directory. So when I do git add dot, it's saying give me this on down, and if there's folders in there, it's going to follow them all the way through. But you also saw that it tells you how to like, we don't want to add that video file. Let's take that out, right? Git restore staged.
The reason why I ask, I really do like Studio. I really like Studio because one, you could easily work on multiple projects at the same time, and plus two, your command, and just in case you got to use Git, is underneath you.
Yep, and you're gonna see that like if you use actual Visual Studio or some of the other ones like Eclipse or NetBeans or God forbid you have to use something even crazier Like a lot of them are going to have a very similar structure to this. Almost all of them will let you have a terminal in there. A lot of them are going to have some kind of interaction with source control, so you can do it through the menus. From the context of learning as a class and as a student, this stuff is probably the most important bit. Knowing what the actual commands are behind the scenes, because if we used Atom, for example, they're going to have a menu over here, but that doesn't translate well when you're interviewing and they say, how would you check something? How would you pull something down from GitHub? Okay, well, I would click a button and click a button. That's not the right answer. The answer is git pull. Or the answer is git pull origin master or origin main.
Also, do you have to use what they use? Get all like say if somebody using Git, but I use Studio just to simplify, but I could like forward or pull out their stuff from the GitHub. Does it have?
The
Go
amount
ahead.
of flexibility you have in any future employer is going to be different from case to case. I've worked in some environments, especially in the government, where I didn't even have a computer. I had a thin client, and when I logged in, it gave me a brand new desktop every single day that was configured in a specific way that everyone else on the team had.
Okay.
Sometimes, my current company, half the team is on Mac, half the team is on Windows, and so we just work on the same system. Whether we're using, we'll still use Git collectively amongst the team, but how you use Git is entirely up to you. Some people are using Atom, some people are using Visual Studio Code, some people are using something else. But some employers are going to be very strict. Other employers are going to be flexible.
Okay.
It's good. It's just going to depend. But for the purposes of setting you guys up for success,
All right.
it's really important that you know the underlying fundamentals. Because when you get out into the real world, who knows? It's going to just depend. And we're just teaching Git. There's like 10 other version control systems. You might have to use those.
Maybe even get more. I thought Git was like the standard.
No, Git is a popular current one.
Oh, okay. It's
15 years ago, Git didn't even exist, right? We were using Subversion back in the early 2000 to 2010. Everybody was using Subversion. There was another one called CBS, Concurrent Versioning System. That was a popular competitor at the time, so you were either using CBS or Subversion. There's another one called Perforce. There's another one called Mercurial that's really popular right now. So it's between really Git and Mercurial. But then, kind of like we talked about last week, if you're working on a video game, you might be using Perforce. So you might be using, if you're working in a Microsoft team, they might want you to use Visual Source Safe or whatever Microsoft uses these days. It's really going to depend on the job. And it's just important to remember that almost all of them follow the same pattern of pulling something down, working on it, and then checking your changes and then pushing it back up. The pattern is the important part, not the tool itself.
Okay.
What else? What other questions we got? You guys feeling pretty strong about HTML so far? Yeah. Is anyone feeling like this is a lot? Okay. The fun stuff starts with CSS, because then all the rules we've been learning are out the window. You can make your unordered lists look like ordered lists, and you can make divs look like spans, and make things hidden or visible, right? But it's important to be able to capture that stuff. Here, let's before we move on, let's we kind of briefly touched on this. Let me pull up my window here. Gosh, why do we have so many? Yeah, there we go.
Like your background.
Oh yeah, it changes every couple of minutes. What is it right now? Oh, it's Mandalorian. Nice.
Yeah.
Very good.
I want to watch it, but I have the Disney Plus yet. Because I've been watching them.
Yep. All right. Another tool that is going to be super invaluable, and we've kind of showed it off a few times. If you click the three dots, if you're using Chrome, and you go down to More Tools, this takes you to Developer Tools. And inside of here, if you're in Elements, you can see the structure of your website, right? So you can see that the head is a tag that has other tags inside of it, other elements. The body is expandable. There's a tree, or it's called the document object model, but it's essentially creating a tree of all the elements on down the list. Go ahead, Gregory. What?
Make it bigger because it's kind of blurry.
I don't know if I can make this bigger because it's like built in. Oh yeah, I can. Cool. All right. You guys see that a little bit better? Great. So let's scroll down to our list example, right? Because we had some nested lists, right? So we have a list here, and you can see all of the children of that parent element, the OL, at the top. And you remember we started making nested lists inside the second element. So you can see that's where we got our lower Roman lists. And the cool thing about this is if you got it on screen, as you're mousing over the elements inside this tree, inside of our document object model, it's pointing out exactly which element you're hovering over by showing up as blue. So as I move into these other lists, you can see this top one is the one I'm on. Now I'm on the bottom one. Or I can get all of them by hovering over the parent. Some other interesting things here, you can kind of see if I click on this. Over on the right, it can show you as we start diving into CSS next week, or later this week, excuse me. You can see all of the elements all the styles that have been applied. So by default, you can see that it's got a margin inline start. It's telling you it's display block. Remember we were learning about display block versus inline. So this OL by default is a block. It's going to take up as much space as it has available. If we change this to inline, we can do this right. Well, I can do it in here. What do I do? No, do it right here. If I go display inline, right, and I move off of it, now it messes up all the formatting because it took away all that extra space. And you can see that it took out this display block using that strike through element that we learned about earlier, strike, right? You can turn these on and off with these checkboxes, right? So I can, if a style has been applied to an element, behind the scenes what it's doing is it's commenting it out. And you can see it's put a little CSS comment here, but it's a really quick, this is a very useful tool for quickly taking a glance at what is happening behind the scenes in the HTML, what is happening with your styles, and letting you fill with it in a way that is really, really beautiful. There's also this really powerful tool down here that's showing the border and the padding and the margin. So this one, for example, has a 40 padding set, and it's showing up to the right. This one has a border that is not there, but if we started putting in things like margin 30, border 1 px solid green, right? You're going to see this happening right here, and you'll be able to hover over and highlight those things that have changed on the page. So it's a really great way for visually navigating as we start diving into styles. And again, to get there, it was 3 dots, more tools, developer tools. Other important things, and this is really going to come into handy as we start diving into JavaScript. You get a console, and this is a JavaScript console that is attached to your page. So we can do like alert hello, right, which is going to make an alert box pop up. All the things that you can do in JavaScript, you can force to do in JavaScript on your page in this console. Then you can also see all the media that was loaded. So we can see that this page has requested that we load cats.jpg. It's put in an embedded Google link. So all the media, if we wanted to see some of the information about the cats, yeah, it tells you this is a 1280 by 841 size image, right? That is why it's so big on our page. All of the media that this page knows about will show up in here in the sources section. And then as we start learning about more interactive JavaScript, the network tab will let you see behind the scenes requests that are happening. You can see all the times it loaded that girl video and we played it. It's loading it and it's showing you how long it's taken to request each frame. And then we have some performance profiling tools, and you can see some of the stuff that's happening behind the scenes to let you know if you're building a good page. If you've got a whole bunch of images and stuff loaded, this will let you profile here. But for the most part, I work inside Elements and I work inside the console, and occasionally we'll work in the network. Those 3 tabs are worth their weight in gold to the web developer. Another way to kind of get into this, and we showed this off the other day, I think for some of you, if you right-click on an element and you click Inspect, or use, in Windows case, Control-Shift-I or Command-Shift-I on Mac, I believe. If we do this, it's going to take you directly to that element, right? So I can click Inspect, and it's going to scroll me down that big list and let me look at what that element is. Right? And I can even come in here and change things. I can say, don't bring a pillow. Right? So even though it didn't change my source code, it changed it in the browser. So I can play with things here before checking anything in or making any changes to the code, just while I'm experimenting. So, think of this as your playground for web development. There's all kinds of things you can do in here that help you really get a handle on what is happening and what is going on. But it's important to note these changes are local to here, and as soon as I reload this page, it goes back to saying bring a pillow, and it took off all my margins and padding and all the stuff we were playing with. Okay. What else? Cool. Any questions? We've covered HTML. We've really covered pretty in depth. We're going to start learning about styling quite a bit more tomorrow. Is there anything anyone would like to go over again? And then again, W3 Schools is going to be your best friend as you're learning HTML and CSS, because it's going to tell you this is what the tag is. These are all the crazy attributes you need to be aware of. It tells you what browsers it will work on, right? Like, so the image tag has been around since 1983. You can use it on everything. Andrew, go ahead.
I might be skipping ahead, but are we going to get into semantic HTML, or is it okay just use divs?
Yeah, we've been kind of covering that all of today as well, right? When I'm talking about like why would you use strong instead of bold, right? That's the difference between semantic and non-semantic. Kind of what you're talking about in divs and spans is definitely what we're going to cover tomorrow. Behind the scenes, if we just focus on the tags that we've learned about over the last couple of days, since really Thursday of last week, all of these have been most of the semantic tags. And there's a few more. There's like a section tag. There's like sections of one of the main ones, right, that describe the content a little bit more rather than just being a box that you can put content in, right? So a great example is a div is functionally identical by default to a paragraph tag. But if you're going to be writing a paragraph of text, wrap it in a P, not a div. Or if you're going to use a div, still put a P around the paragraph. There's a lot of complex rules about what you should use versus what you shouldn't, but in general, what we've been talking about to date is about the content. So everything that we've gone over today, paragraphs, lists, headers, heading tags, even the weird lists like the definition list, those are all semantic tags. When we start diving into some of the crazy stuff you're going to do to get interactivity, or to get I want to make a menu over here, a lot of that is going to be divs and spans, and you're still going to want to make sure that when you make a div over on the left to be your left menu, you're still going to want to put the menu items in a unordered list. Okay. There are a few other crazy semantic types like article. Let's look at some of the. I think we actually cover it tomorrow. Let's pull it up. Let's get a sneak peek, huh? Yeah. So like header, nav, article, section, footer, aside. These are some of the things that are new to HTML5, and they're really useful to do and to know about. I use nav pretty often. I'll sometimes use article, but only if I'm building like a website that's a blog, where it's like this is an actual article of content. These are really useful to know that they exist. But for the purposes of being like literally a entry-level software engineer, unless you're... A great example of this is your portfolio. You're probably going to use a lot of these in your portfolio page where you're showing off who you are. But in the context of building a web application as a developer in your jobs, unless you're working on a newspaper, you go to work at the Augusta Chronicle or something, you'll probably never see these or use these again, except for maybe nav, maybe footer occasionally, right? Because most of the time you're going to be like, I need to display a table of all my clients, and I need to click a button and edit that client and click a save button, right? This stuff is about, it's more content-specific controls that is similar to using a paragraph tag or an H1 or something. But yeah, we will get to this for sure. I think this is the end of tomorrow, so let me get to this. But you are jumping ahead. Very good for knowing that exists. I use those so infrequently that I just know they exist, and every once in a while I have to go in W3 schools and look it up and use it then. But I mostly focus on products on the web, not websites. Cool. All right. It is 7 o'clock. Let's take a 15-minute break. Come back at 7:15, and we'll play a game. It'll be fun. All right. See y'all in a bit. And I'm going to present my screen. So we are going to play a learning game called Kahoot. This was recommended by the previous student who had gone through the class before. There's a bunch of these types of fun little learning exercises and activities. When it makes sense throughout the course, especially for like preparing for quizzes and things, like this stuff is super fun to me. And if you guys enjoy it, we'll try to do these pretty often so that it's not just rote memorization or asking questions or turning your brain on. We can get a little competitive. When we get into JavaScript, there's fun versions of this where you're like using JavaScript to play video games against robots and stuff. So those are real fun, and we'll look for those kind of opportunities. So what you're going to need to participate in this game is your browser. I'm going to click this thing. If you go to www.kahoot.it and you plug in this pin, 9367146, y'all will join this game. I'm going to turn down the volume a little bit. And as soon as everybody's connected, we'll get started. It's going to display the question on my screen. It's going to give you a few seconds to read it. And then down in the bottom on your computers, you're going to have 4 choices. It's going to be like a red choice, a yellow choice, a green choice, and a blue choice. So you'll have to read the answers and click the color choice that represents the answer. And at the end, we get to, the faster you select the choice is how many points you're going to get. So everything in these questions, for the most part, we've touched over the last week. There's we're going to do a get game next. But you want to answer quickly because that is how you're going to get the highest score and then beat your fellow teammates. Still waiting on Gregory and Wendy, I guess. Who's Star? Oh, nice. Estrella. Oh, you're wearing a NASA shirt. Very cool. I did some work with NASA a few years ago. They're good. They're a good group.
I ended up getting the shirt for some theme at my old job, and one of the men that worked there, he actually worked on the first ship that they sent out from the retirement home. Yeah,
Excellent.
he worked there.
That's super cool.
Super cool.
NASA has, like, if you ever get a chance to go further south into Florida, at the Kennedy Space Center, they have a museum of all this stuff. And so they'll hold up, like, a brick that is, like, 200 pounds or something, and it is, like, 1 byte of RAM, right? So something that you have millions of bytes in your computer that's on a tiny little stick used to be like a block that they would actually physically weave wire between pins to be able to store just like a single value, right? It's a really cool museum down there. Wendy, are you going to be able to join us? Yep, there she goes. All right, cool. We're all in. I'm going to click start, and we'll play. HTML. Oh, some of you got thrown away by the hyperterminal markup language. Very good.
Mine didn't actually show a question on my screen.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, you have to watch on my
screen.
I
was a little confused about that too.
I see. Yep.
Okay.
You're watching on my screen and answering on your screen, so make sure that you can see at least both. Or be quick on the switch with the Command tab or Alt tab for us Windows folks. Cool. All right, next. So we can see who's on the leaderboard. Right now it's Leah and Greg are battling out for first place. Nice. All right. You guys can all see. What is the correct tag for the largest heading?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of you got H1 is the correct answer, the green. And then one of you got head, which is where we put metadata, right? Not a heading. Oh yeah, everybody's on the scoreboard now. Let's go. Leah's taking a commanding lead over Greg. Greg fell off. Oof. All right, question 3. What is the correct HTML tag for a line break? Nice. Yeah, most of you got BR. Break is not the correct tag, but BR. Very good. Ooh. Leah's quick on the sticks over here. All right. It's going to be tough to beat. Question 4. What is the preferred way of adding a background color in HTML? Ooh, this is a CSS question. So we kind of touched about this today, right? What is the attribute that lets us set CSS on an element? Most of you got that we do body style equals background color yellow. We learned about the style attribute today briefly when we were playing with list style types and stuff. Yeah, good. Ooh, Selena's moving up. All right, this is gonna get good. Question 5. Choose the correct HTML tag to make a text bold. You gonna pick strong, or are you gonna pick B? You gonna pick EM? Oh, most people got the right answer, strong, but you got fooled by bold and fooled by the B tag. Yeah, we definitely want to use strong over bold for semantic reasons, for sure. Ooh, Leah's on fire. Answer streak of 5. Will she ever miss a question? Let's find out. Choose the correct tag to make it italic. You're going to use IT, I, italic, or EM. Yeah, most of you got EM correct. Blue was also a valid answer, but a few of you got italic the other way. Good stuff. 6 answers in a row. All right. What is the correct HTML for creating a hyperlink? Yeah, most of you got that right. You were not fooled by the a name. What does a name do for us as an attribute? Does anyone remember? That was one of the first things we covered today.
So you can reference it with a hashtag and jump to it.
Yeah, it's for internal page linking. Yeah, good job, Andrew. All right, Selena's still in a distant second. We gotta hope Leah misses one, huh? Which of all these tags are all table tags? Which of these tags are all table tags? Yeah, so which of those lists all belong in a table? This is something from last week that most of you played with. And we'll cover in more detail tomorrow. Yeah, most of you got table TR, TD. TR, what does that do? Who remembers?
It's a row.
Yep, and TD is...
Tedious. No, just kidding.
I can't remember what that one is.
Yeah, it just defines a cell, right? So it's the column of a row. I don't remember what TD stands for. We should look this up.
It's like
Table
table data.
Table data, that's it. We did
Yeah,
look it
now
up.
that you said that, I remember you looking it up.
Yeah. I remember looking it up now, but I forgot it already because you just know it's TD. Whew. Got a 1,000-point lead, Leah. 8 in a row. Not bad. How can you make a numbered list? Ooh, Ooh, yeah, most of you got this. It's OL for an ordered list. UL is an unordered list, so that one is non-numbered by default. Right? We learned how to override it today, though. Who wants to guess? Do we think Leah will go the entire game without missing a question?
Don't put me under pressure like that.
All right, question 10. How can you make a bulleted list? Yeah, most of you got UL as an unordered list, and then OL is the numbered one, right? So if we wanted it to be bulleted by default, it'd be list style type disk is the default behavior, but yeah, unordered list is UL. Great job. 10 in a row. What is the correct HTML tag for inserting an image? Yeah. Ooh, a bunch of people got thrown. The yellow answer had image, IMAGE, not IMG, the short tag. That was the only difference between the two. Close. Oh, Leah and Selena still battling it out. Oh, it's getting good. What is wrong with the line of code in this picture? Can you guys see that line of code? It's kind of hard to see. Oh. This also spells quotian, so that there's some, yeah. You got the incorrect answer because they don't know how to spell, whoever made this quiz. Nice, good job, everybody. Yeah, we always want to wrap our attributes with quotation marks so that the value is correctly. What is the correct HTML for inserting a background image? We haven't covered this yet, so I will give you a hint that it has something to do with a style attribute. Okay. Yeah, that one's definitely one we'll cover later this week, but good job to the Selena who took over the spot. Oh, but you're still down 500 points. Oh, no.
It's all in the speed, too.
Yep. The quicker you answer, the better it is for you. Yeah, that was a tough one. What does CSS stand for? Does anyone know? Here's your chance. I think I've mentioned this a few times. All right, everybody got that one pretty quickly. Yeah. Cascading style sheets. Nice. Leah's still slowly increasing her lead. What is the correct HTML for referring to an external style sheet? This is one we also haven't covered. So I'm excited to see who guesses correctly. Yeah, a lot of you got it. Yeah. We use the link tag to pull in an external document. Good. Oh, Selena took the top spot. Woof. It's getting good. Where in an HTML document is the correct place to refer to an external style sheet? Where we put our metadata? Yo mama. With 999. Oh, that's classic. Nice. In the head, yeah. Perfect. Ooh, Andrew's on a bit of a streak too. Come back with 3 in a row. Nice. It's anyone's game at this point. Which lines have errors in the picture below? You're gonna have to look real close at the picture. Yep. It was missing a closing tag for sure.
I knew it, but I was taking too long.
Oh no. Selena's opening up a lead with an answer streak of 16. Oof. What is the function of the UL tag? Yeah, most of you got that. Seems like there's still some confusion about what a UL tag is versus an OL tag. We could definitely touch on that some more for sure. Good job, everybody. How do you turn a line into a comment? This is one that I showed off briefly yesterday, but you probably don't remember. So if you guess correctly, I'll be impressed. Whisper it quietly to a neighbor. That's funny. Yep. So the what was wrong about the blue, the option most people picked, is that you don't put an exclamation point at the end of the comment tag. It's just the beginning. Ooh, Star moved up. Nice, Estrella. It's gonna be a fight to the finish, huh? What will this code generate? Div style, width 50, height 50, background color red. I'm confident in your ability to guess the right answer. Yeah, most of you got a red square. It's going to make a 50 height, 50 width box and make it red. That's CSS. We'll definitely cover it for sure later on this week. So you got the right answers. Nice. Neck and neck up there in the top 3 spots. Why is proper syntax important? Yeah. Most of you guessed it. The code will have problems if you wrote the wrong stuff. Nice. Answer streak of 20. Oof. What is syntax? We haven't really talked on this too much, but syntax for being naughty. Yeah, so either of those answers at the bottom would have been accepted. It's the rules for punctuation and writing, and it's also the rules about the symbols and stuff that we use. Good job to all of you. Let's see what the final score was. Leah got 3rd place. Oof. 2nd place is Estrella. Nice. And then Selena swooping in at the last minute, taking the top spot. Good job. Did you guys enjoy that game? It's kind of fun to just mix it up a bit and think fast while you're, I think that's the hardest part, especially with new stuff, is the speed that it puts you under. It forces you to think quickly. All right, let's do another one, this time all about Git. Okay, so we're going to go back to kahoot.it, and our new number is 433-7898. Screenshot of our winners here and paste it into Slack so we can all celebrate in successes.
780.
Yeah, sorry. 433-7898. So again, this one is going to be all about Git, adding and working with repositories and all that stuff. The comeback. Who's the comeback? It's got to be Selena. No, she's over here. Estrella, maybe? Nice.
Andrew?
Oh, Andrew, you're the comeback. All right. Well, let's see it then. Let's go on a streak. Don't get me wrong. All right, we got everybody now? Yeah. Let's go. How do you initialize a repository? Yeah, most of you got that immediately. Get a init. That creates a brand new repo. Good job. All right. Next. How do you see what the state of your current project is? And you guys are getting this quick, huh? Get status, exactly. Add a file to the staging area. Yep, no fooling you guys. Super impressed. 3 answers in a row, nice. Stores the stage changes. What stores things? Yep, commit, good. Good job, Gregory, hitting answer streak 3. Awesome. A journal that remembers all the changes committed so far in the order they were committed. Nice. You guys are trekking along. This is too easy. I need to pick some hard questions, huh? Add a remote repository. Ooh, yeah, most of you got it. Remote add. Let's get remote add, and then remember the URL you have to paste in that you get from GitHub. Nice. Estrella is taking the top spot by being speedy. Good job. Tells Git where to put the commits when we're ready. Yeah, most of you got it. It's git push. What is the difference between push and pull? Then remember?
Push forward the information to GitHub and pull it when you're trying to pull information from GitHub.
Yep, that's it. Ooh, things are shaking up in the 3, 4, 5, 6 slots, huh? Pulls changes from the repository. This one's easy. It's got the answer right there in the question. Nice. All right. Shows the difference from the last commit. Yep. Yeah, git diff will show you by default what happened last versus where you're at right now. Nice. Shows the changes that were just staged. Yeah, good. We didn't cover this in class because to be honest, I don't think I've ever used this command, but yep. All right, Wendy, 3 in a row. Let's go. Unstages files. Yep, get reset. Nice. make files go back to how they were at the last commit. You guys remember this? Yeah, this is when you would check out. Remember, we were looking at the git log last week. We would pick one of those commit messages, and we would say git check out whatever, and it would roll us back. Oh, I went too quickly. Remove actual files from the disk. So if we wanted to delete something, how would we do it? Yeah, git remove, git rm. And that command mirrors how we would delete just a file by itself. So it's rm is the same way. Let's see how we're doing here. All right. Oh, Andrew's within chomping distance. All right. It's going to come down to who's quicker on the clicks. Add a message. Yep. Git commit -m will let you put the message in the line. Estrella's hanging on to that lead. Oof. It's going to come down to this final question. You guys all ready for the final clicks? Yeah? Here we go. Used to delete a branch. Yeah, most of you got, it's git branch -d, and then the name of the branch would delete it. I don't know if we covered that or not, but you all guessed it. Let's see who won.
Question.
Mm-hmm.
Why won't be git branch RM?
Is that a command? Git branch rm?
Wait, hold up. It's the remove command I was thinking of.
So we can check out a branch with that. Wait, who won? Estrella hang on to the lead. Leah swept in at the last second. It took Andrew's spot. Oof. Let's take a picture of this one as well for posterity. Share it into Slack. All right, let's take a look at what.
I slightly thought it was
So we're gonna make a new branch called delete me. So how do we find out how to delete a branch if we just want to search Google? We could just say
how to get delete by
to delete git branch, right? Because there's usually a few different ways to do it. So we can do git branch -d, and then the name of the branch. Okay, so if we ran that command right now, git branch -d delete me, right? Because we're checked out in it right now, so we'd have to check out main again. Git check out main. Git branch -d delete me. Okay, that's one way. Yeah, that's the main way. I don't know any other ways to delete a branch. We can delete one from GitHub if we want to delete it upstream as well by doing git push origin delete, right? But most of the time when we're going to delete a branch from GitHub, we're almost always going to do it through the branches menu, either as a part of merge or we're going to click on the delete button here. Oh, see, I just deleted it. Then we can restore it. Any other questions about Git we want to play with before diving into what we're going to do for homework and stuff tomorrow? Nope. All right. All right. Now, we're going to have homework tomorrow. It's going to be very similar to the homework. I mean, we're still building on the fundamentals of what we've been doing before. But what's important to note is that this one has a lot of instructions. So getting a 100% grade on this means that you followed all the instructions explicitly. And so it's going to tell you to create a new repository. It's going to tell you what to name it. As a software developer, going forward, one of the things that's really important to note is that you're going to be given tasks that tell you to do X, Y, and Z. And it's only correct if you do X, Y, and Z. So this is an example of one of those homework assignments where we're going to try and simulate what you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis in your real lives. So it's going to be telling you to put in content that is in a paragraph. It's going to tell you to put in a link to your favorite website. it's very important that you make sure that you follow along exactly with the instructions as written. Now, there's going to be opportunity in here. It's going to say a link to your favorite website. I don't know what your favorite website is, so you can pick whatever website you want. But when it tells you that you have to have a link to your favorite website, then there must at least be a link to your favorite website or a link to a website, and you lie about it to me. That's fine too. Another important thing, it tells you in here, you're going to put in a paragraph with text content. We haven't covered this yet, but it says, hint, use lorem dummy text. So it's really important. You're going to see this through your entire career. It's very, very common for designs and templates to use what's called lorem ipsum text, which looks like this. You're going to see this kind of stuff everywhere for the rest of your career. It's a very common way to just create paragraphs of content that doesn't mean anything, but that it shows off a lot of the common frequencies of letters and words. So this lorem ipsum text, for example, if we were to plug this in to our paragraphs up here, instead of just typing a bunch of, this is a large paragraph, look how fancy I am, right? If I type this code, I just copied and pasted, and let's actually do the word wrap so that it shows up correctly, right? You can see that this text means nothing, right? It's just a bunch of gibberish. But when we pull up our page and we look at it here, you can kind of see that it has like a flow to it that will simulate natural language English, rather than being what I did for quickly generating tests, which is like, look at how fancy I am. This is a paragraph of text, and copy and paste it over and over and over again. Lorem ipsum, specifically this type of generated text, you're going to often see this given to you by front-end designers, where they're going to be like, this is how the page should be structured, and they're going to put paragraphs that have just this kind of dummy content in there. It's also pretty common as like a requirement for building new stuff. So in the example from our homework tomorrow, let me pull that page up again. It says, hey, a paragraph with text content. Now, you're more than welcome in the context of this homework tomorrow to like write up paragraphs of text. You guys have been very creative so far, and I appreciate it. It's more fun to read and look at. But you can always use something like lorem ipsum to meet the strict requirements of what we're asking for here in the homework. Now, I want to quickly show off, there are lorem ipsum generators. You can pick one and put it in Visual Studio Code. So let's just quickly search for lorem ipsum. Yeah. Let's just take a look at this top one. So open VS Code. Okay. Yeah. So if I install this, it's telling me that if I press F1 and type lorem, it's going to insert a paragraph. So we've installed it now. So let's come in here and delete this paragraph and just say F1 lorem insert a paragraph. So now, see, there you go. I've just now generated dummy content in my source code that looks good. And if we come over here, we can see that now I've got a second paragraph that is randomly generated gibberish, right? This is a tool or a technique you're going to probably use, especially those of you like Andrew who really wants to do some of the front end stuff. This is you'll see this in typography in magazines. You'll see it in layout if you ever work in print. You'll see it all the time with templates. I mean, we could probably pull up some free HTML blog template. Right? If we search for just some blog template website, I'd be willing to bet a couple of these have lorem ipsum content as a part of their. Let's go to a live demo. Yeah. Or you'll see some content. Yeah, it's even talking about lorem ipsum in a paragraph to use here, right? Like, you will see this kind of stuff over and over and over again in your career. So when we ask in the homework for, create a paragraph, you can use lorem ipsum if you want, right? You can put in gibberish, or you can take the time to write stuff out. But what's really important is that there's a whole bunch of steps in here of things that are expected to be included in the homework to get 100%, and that as you miss those items, right? If you wait until the very last minute or the deadline, I'm not going to be able to return it to you and be like, yo, you missed section 4. So all I have as a choice is to mark it down. So it's very important, especially as you move into your careers, to be very explicit in reading what does the directions say, and then it's up to you, and that this is going to happen to you forever, and it's going to annoy the piss out of you. The instructions that you're given sometimes won't make sense, and it's up to you to go to the customer and be like, hey, you said you want A, and you said you want B, and those things are in conflict. Which one do you really want? So get in the habit now, especially over the homework, to be very explicit in reading the directions, following along, and doing what it says. So tomorrow, we're really just making another web page, but this one will be slightly more complex. It's going to link to other pages, and you're going to put it in a brand new repository. So treat this like, hey, this is a new project, and I'm going to build a new website. And then for the rest of the week, as we start styling and building it, we need these elements to exist so that we can start to make them look pretty. Okay? So it's going to be very important that you have the content in here correctly structured. Any questions about any of that? So someone was saying today, like, hey, the homework didn't take all that much time. It's going to get more complex. This was week 1 stuff. Now we're in week 2, week 3, 4, 5. I mean, this is just going to keep building on each other. So it definitely will. You will definitely start to need more of your lab time to complete some of this homework for sure. And I think the speaker from last week on Thursday was like, keep up with the work, because it just it can be easy to get behind, and we don't want that for any of you. All right. Any questions about any of that? We got roughly an hour left. We got plenty of time to go over anything you'd like to talk about. We can talk about Git. We can talk about navigating the command line. We can play more with CSS. I'm trying to preserve the stuff we're going to talk about tomorrow for tomorrow. So more stuff around tables. Some of the more advanced HTML elements that are more in the semantic side or more in the structural side, instead of purely talking about paragraphs and headings and lists. But we got an hour. I'm more than happy to go over anything you guys want. So this time belongs to you. What would you like to talk about? Go ahead, Leah.
Could you go over like scrolling in a web page again?
Which part of scrolling?
Like clicking on a link and then it scrolling to the top.
Oh yeah, sure, absolutely. Great. Yeah, so that one's one of the more complicated things. We kind of breezed through it today. So we have this is a big long page, right? Obviously full of stuff. And so this is a great example. If we were talking about navigation, this is generally where you'd put this type of work. So we're going to create. So we've got. Let's just go through sections and add a bunch of anchors that will let us get there quickly. So we know that this is big heading 1. So we're going to say a name equals big heading 1, right? We're going to close that tag. Then we're going to scroll down. We're going to say, we used this previously, but we're going to say this is scroll to this, right? Then we're going to scroll down and we want to get to fun with links. So we're going to do a name equals fun with links, right? And then we're going to go to, we're going to do fun with lists. So same idea. A name equals fun with lists, right? And we'll say a name equals images and media, right? So we've defined a bunch of spots that we want to be able to jump to quickly. And how this is important to us is that we can come up to the very top of the page and we can say, we can come in here before we even have any content on the page, before our headings and stuff, and we can make an unordered list, right? And we were talking about where would you use lists and things before. Like this is exactly the thing I most frequently use a list for, is a bunch of navigation elements. So I'll put in a name. So I got my first list item, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say a href. Href is hypertext reference, and I'm going to go to big heading 1, and I'm going to say this is top beginning of page, right? /n. Then I want another list item, and I want this one to be a href. What do we call it? Scroll to this. And we got to put in our hashtag scroll to this. So we're basically building, without having it be pretty well styled, we are making a navigation mechanism, or a nav menu. So what is our next one? Fun with links and fun with lists. So we'll say fun with links. We'll make another one that is ahref hashtag fun with lists. If we want to be correct, because we care about attention to detail. Put that there. And then what was the last one? Images and media, I think. Href equals images and media. Images and media. All right. So if we load our page now, and we pull open, yeah. So now we got this list of navigation elements, and the beginning of page obviously didn't move us because we're already at the top, but we can scroll to this, and I'm clicking the back button with my, I've got a mouse 4, so mouse 4 is back, but just to show off, like, fun with links takes me right to links. I can click back up here. Fun with lists takes me to lists, and images and media takes me to our images and media. Right, so the two components that you definitely need to make this work is a name equals some word, and you want that to be kind of empty, right? And then the other thing, the other component of this inside the page is a href, and then hashtag some word and link text. Right? So those are the, you need two anchors to be able to link inside of a page. One with the place you're jumping to, and one with the place you're jumping from. Does that make it a little bit more clear, Leah?
Yeah, that's really good. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Gregory, you had a hand up?
No, I'll change my mind.
Okay. We can spend as much time or as little time on all this stuff as you guys want. It seems like, especially based on your Kahoot quiz, that you're grasping this stuff. These are the fundamentals. We're going to build on this for the entire rest of the course. There's other stuff you can do with anchor tags, right? So instead of having an href, we could just as easily, and we might at some point, have an on-click, and we're going to say JavaScript is going to do something with this. So this can be alert hello, right? And so when we load our page, I think we showed this off yesterday. So it doesn't show up as a link because it doesn't have an href with it, but when I click on it, it did the JavaScript, right? So we're going to write interactivity into our pages, whether we're using anchor tags so that any browser knows what to do with it, or we're writing JavaScript. Maybe it's a button, maybe it's a link, maybe it's just, we can make divs clickable so that you click on a div and it does something behind the scenes. So really understanding all of the tools, all of the underlying elements and tags that we're going to use for all that interactivity is going to be incredibly important, because JavaScript, until we get into the server side of JavaScript, is always going to be operating on some of these HTML elements. You're always going to be clicking on something that exists on the page, and it's going to be updating content on the page. This is always going to be the structure of everything you build going forward. What else would we like to dive deeper into? I can come up with more examples of how we would use certain elements in the real world if you'd like. Like using lists like this for navigation, that's really common. Another thing you would sometimes do with navigation lists like this, and this is kind of dive into some of the CSS for this week. I can come in here and say, this is ID navigation, right? Navigation. And so what we would do with CSS normally is I'd come in here and have a style sheet that would say, on any LI that is under my, why is my tab button not working? When I hit tab, it's moving around the page instead of moving here. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to save this, close this window. Something is broken. And I bet it's probably that stupid lorem ipsum. Lorem ipsum, there we go. I just need to reload. All right, so I hit tab. I'm going to say navigation LI is this. So every LI that is in this navigation menu, I'm going to say display inline border 1px solid CCC margin 5px 10px padding 5px. Right? So what I've done is I've essentially said, hey, I want instead of these being block level elements, I want them to be inline. Maybe we want to even go into navigation and say, I don't want those little dots by default. So we learned about this a little bit today. We would say just list style type is none. Right? So now we've taken out those little dots. It's not working. Why is it not working? Let's change this to nav. Boop-a-doop-a-doop. Navigation is a special word. File. Hey, what? Cancel. Type. Close text /CSS. I have to click go live. There it goes. So I was reading from a server that didn't exist anymore because it was attached to the previous thing. So now we've made our list is a bunch of boxes that are in line with each other, and it kind of looks bad because we didn't do anything to make it responsive, right? Like you can see it's scrolling and it's making things look bad. But we've added navigation that is in line at the top, has a border around them, and we could easily play with these things. We can be like, the border doesn't look good. Let's take that out. And so now this is what it looks like without a border. Or we could say border right 1px solid FFF, right? Or 000. So we're going to add one black border just to the right, so that it kind of gives you those little pipes that you've probably seen before, right? This is the kind of thing that we can do with CSS, because behind the scenes, structurally, we know this is a list of items that we want to control how it displays on this page. And this could have just as easily been a list with a list inside of it, kind of we talked about submenus. So that's structurally how we would go about starting that kind of development. And then it's a lot of trial and error until it looks the way you want it to look and matches your colors and backgrounds and stuff, so that it functions exactly how we want. What else? What would we like to talk about?
So I just spent a few minutes while you were doing that trying to remember how to do the whole week 2 thing, getting from GitHub into the VS Code through the Git bash.
Yeah.
So that was fun. I figured it out.
Yeah.
But it did take a minute. So
yeah,
I don't know if anybody else might
just,
need a refresher.
Let's just go over it. It's a lot of the commands you guys already know. So if I'm in my Git bash, I'm in here. I know that I'm in main of week 1. All we would really want to do is go to the previous directory, and then we have a few different options. Remember, we talked about there's a couple ways to go about this. You can make the repository locally, which would be, let's make dir week 2. Then I'm going to cd to that directory, so I'm in week 2. And then I could do, what is the command to initialize a repository?
Get init.
Get init, exactly right, Leo. So if I do get init here, it's going to tell me I initialized an empty repository, and I'd be starting from step 1. It exists now. The other way we can go about doing this, let me just back out to the previous directory, and I can do rm-rf week 2. Right, so I've just deleted that repository. It no longer exists. We can go the GitHub first route, which would be go to GitHub, come in here, click new, create a repository called week 2, make it public. We can add a README, we can add a gitignore. Remember, this was some of the important stuff, especially for the Mac folks who don't want their DS store folder floating around all the time. And then when I click create repository in here, oh, I gotta pick so let's just say node. Right, now I can create a repository, and it exists, and we would clone it into this directory. So if I'm on SSH, I can click copy, and I can type in my terminal git clone, and then paste that string that we get from GitHub. And this is going to pull that whole folder down into my computer for the first time and say, this is now a Git repository. And if we cd into it, cd week 2, it's exactly at the same spot we were at before. It's just that this has a README, and it also has, if we do ls-a, it has a gitignore. So if we wanted to, we're Andrew or we're Estrella on a Mac, we can go nano.gitignore, and we're going to put, we want to not bring in DS store, right? So save and exit. And now we are all caught up, right? So there's a couple different ways you can go. One is local computer first, and the other is GitHub first. If we went local computer first, what would we do? What would we need to do? We'd have to use git remote what? So we can get remote RM origin, right? So if we do get push or get pull now, right, it's going to tell you there's no destination. So we'd have to, if we built it on our computer first, we could do get remote add origin, and then we can just pull in this this address right here, right, and paste. So now if I do get push, it's going to tell you get push set upstream origin main. And if I do get push, it's going to tell us everything's up to date. We haven't made any changes, but you know, it's going to walk you through, if you're doing this in the command line, each step you need to do along the way. What else?
Can anybody remember how to get the HTML to get the bones in VS Code? What you got to press? Did that make sense, Eric?
I didn't
What I asked? You know how you press the one button and then the other button, and then it gives you the beginning for the HTML, and then it gives you HTML, and then that.
Exclamation tab.
Yeah.
Exclamation tab, yeah, that's exactly right. So if we click new file and call it whatever .html, exclamation part, and then we hit tab. So that's interesting. It's giving us an option here. If I press exclamation part, it's got 3 of these in here. What if I hit that again? Oh, so 3 exclamation marks will just give us the doc type. What if we do 2? That's not an option. So either 1 or 3, but 1 is going to include the skeleton of a web page. Let's talk about indentation a little bit, right? You've seen me indent things. You can see that this head has some of these indented. This is a stylistic choice, but it's very important for you to use through your entire software career. And we're going to see a lot of this in CSS tomorrow, or on Wednesday. We're going to see a lot of this in JavaScript. Is the cleanliness of your code is going to influence how well other people enjoy to work in it. Now, I promise you, whenever you get to your first software development job, those teams are generally going to have style guidelines, and you're going to have to follow them. So they're going to say indent 2 here or 1 here. But in general, the general rule of thumb is whenever you're inside of an element and you're writing another element, you want to be in an extra layer. So if I put an H1 here, right, great, hello, world, right, that would be indented 1 level. If I want to put another thing, like a paragraph, and I want to put in some lorem ipsum nonsense, how do I do that? F1, lorem ipsum, insert a paragraph, right? You see that by default, inside this p tag, it's indented 1 in. Because anytime we go inside an element, we want to go in an extra level of indentation. So if I was in here and I wanted to add an unordered list, right? I would want that unordered list itself, the parent tag, to be indented 1 extra. And this just lets you very visually, as you get bigger and bigger documents, you'll see the structure reflecting in your code. Now, if you're writing code and it all looks like this, and I'm going to show you, let's go here, right? So we've got this, we've got a couple levels of indentation. There's a bunch of content in here. You can see there's some levels of indentation here. If I was to just, let's select everything and make it all, it's all flat, right? This is hard to visually work through, and it'll drive you crazy. So there's no right or wrong answer. This is still syntactically correct. We were talking about syntax in that quiz before. Everything here is accurate. It just looks bad. Okay? And so generally, what is the best rule of thumb is anytime you're going in a level, so a tag within a tag, you want to go in an extra level of indentation. So, and that applies to every language we're going to work on. So if I undo, Control Z, right? Go back to where we were. All right. So, and here's a great example, right? We're inside a tag for style. Now we switch to the language CSS. So I'm going in an extra layer, and then inside these brackets, I'm going in another layer again, right? So there's a flow and a structure. There's almost like an art to how this looks, right? There is absolutely nothing different. You see how I'm adding extra space here between the LI and the A tag here? That there's nothing functionally different between doing this so that it's all on one line and splitting it out to have extra lines. right? So I can do that for all of these. I can come in here and say, here, let's, you guys remember there's the Alt-click little trick that gives you 4 cursors, so I can just quickly go back, and I can do the same thing down here, right? That's one of the uses of an Alt-click. It lets you quickly work with a bunch of tags if you've got them all on the same level. There is absolutely nothing different from this style and the style where they're all broke out. Right? These are all functionally identical, because remember, HTML collapses white space by default, so all these extra stuff is 100% and purely for the benefit of people reading your code. The browser doesn't care. And if we go to a website, let's go to Google just as a great example, because theirs is always notoriously terrible, right? This page looks beautiful. It's nice and simple. View the page source. Everything's all in one line. You can see doc type HTML. We learned about that. Then it goes to HTML. Then it goes to head. So all the stuff you recognize doing, they smushed it all in. This page is not meant to be read by a person. This is for your browser. Okay? So when we're working on code, it's especially important for you to start developing a sense of style for what you like to read and see expressed into the world, especially in the context of if you're working on a team. And that's why I said when you get to your first company or your first job, they're going to have a style guide that says, well, this is how we want our document structured. You might disagree with that document structure. I disagree with a bunch of code styles that I've used at a bunch of employers. I like things to be my way, and I'm very particular. You will get a certain level of particularity where you like your code to look, exactly like this. Some people, to give you a great example, some people when they're writing JavaScript functions, they'll say function name, and it'll be like string. Some people, like I myself, I like this format where the bracket is up here. Some programming languages and some people really like the bracket to be directly below the F in function. I don't know why, it's just preference. But for me, I always like it like this. But if I work at a company that says, we're going to do the brackets like this, you just follow along with the company. And sometimes you argue with your lead engineer and you get into a heated debate of which way is better. There's no right or wrong answer. It's purely stylistic. If we were writing code just for a computer to read, we would all be writing in just ones and zeros, right? That's computer code. That's what's happening behind the scenes. Or, to some degree, it's like move AX, EX, right? Like actual machine language. We're writing code for other people to read. So to me, this is like the most interesting and exciting part of being a software developer is that I'm trying to write code to express myself to other programmers. It has to do something for the computer. It has to be really good code. But I'm writing for other people. I'm writing for you to read. I'm writing for me to read. I'm writing for, me in a year when I look at code I wrote a year ago. I don't blame some idiot in the past, and the idiot's me all along, right? That will happen to you a million times. So does everyone understand, like, when we're doing homework like this, it's really important to just pick a style or pick a set of rules that you're going to be able to follow forever. And you can mix and match. Like, I will often, just out of habit, put extra lines in between. Like, if I'm making a list item and then I'm coming here with a list of links, I'm almost always going to add extra spaces. And the reason I add extra spaces is because I have spent a lot of time, let's just zip back and show you real quick. I'm going to quickly, I added too many. So, boop, boop, boop. All right. I'm just going to move a few of them. So what you'll often do is that you will have lists like this or elements like this, and then you'll go in you'll get a requirement that says, we need to add an unread badge count. And so you'll be like, okay, I need to add a span with a class of blue icon, and that span needs to have the number 5, or 4, so that it's, I'll just change it to 5, so that it's unread, right? So now we've got this thing that was a nice, neat, contained little list of links that now has an unread icon in it. And now, as you start adding some of these things, it'll start falling off the page over here on the right, and it gets to be really unruly. So I've just gotten in a habit personally of keeping all this stuff separate, so that as I'm adding new attributes or new elements in here, right, I can just put this right at the end. Or maybe I don't want to put it right at the end, and I want to have it be at the end of where the icon will go, so I can quickly see, hey, this is the link, and this is the unread icon badge that will pop up at the end, right? This is entirely up to you guys. It's going to become entirely preferential. There's no right or wrong answer. But all that I ask is that as you're doing this homework, you start to think about what style am I putting out into the world? Because that is important. If you come to an employer and they're asking you to do a coding assignment and all of your code looks like this, you'll get laughed out of the room. 100% of the time. At least at my companies. Maybe some other companies be like, that's fine, we just need people. It happens too. You probably don't want to work there because you're going to have a whole bunch of coworkers giving you nonsense like this. Cool. So that's about style and structure. We learned how to make a blank page with exclamation mark tab, which gives us a little framework. We learned about lorem ipsum. If you guys have installed that generator, it's F1 and then you type in lorem and it will give you that function. Another way, I mean, there's a bunch of fun ones that, I mean, there might be, let's see if any of them exist here. Bacon ipsum. Ipsum, right? Oh, it's probably this one, right? I don't know what that is. But anyway, there's a lorem ipsum generator that generates a whole bunch of stuff about breakfast foods, and it'll be like donut ipsum lorem jelly donut, right? A bunch of funny stuff. So you can have some personality in your tools for sure. Bacon ipsum. So you can come into Google and pick out funnier text. Yeah, see. All right. Any other questions? Andrew.
Could you go over maybe how you would want to arrange your files if you're working on a bigger project with maybe like multiple pages and multiple JavaScript files and CSS files going, connected to each web page, maybe how to structure your files just so that when you're referencing them and then also, just organizing them, what's the best way to
I'm gonna give you like a really bad answer, and the bad answer is the way you structure your projects is almost always going to be directly related to what type of framework or environment you're working in. So to give you some concrete examples, most of the time when you're working in the real world, you're either going to be working on a project that already exists, or you're going to be using a framework that makes it easier for you to rapidly develop projects. And so those frameworks are already going to come with some baggage and some overhead on how to do it. But in general, if you're there, with the exception of maybe your portfolio, that'll probably be the last like pure HTML thing you ever build by itself, because HTML on its own, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, while they're expressive for making websites, nobody makes websites anymore. You make web applications that do stuff. And so you're going to need database connections. You're going to need you're going to need some components behind the scenes. You're going to need JavaScript that is from libraries, right? You're going to need things like jQuery, which we'll go into all of these things as well. In general, there's no hard and fast rule where it's like, this is always the best way to do this. And so that's why it's hard to give you this is the best way to do it, because it's always going to be different for the rest of your career. However, I will say that on every project I ever make, I almost always start with the same structure. So I'll open a new window. And let's just start with week 2, which we just created, right? So I'm going to open a folder. I'm going to go to my CBC folder. I'm going to go to week 2. So I'm starting a brand new project. It just has my README in there. This is the top level. This is your document root, right? So if you hear the terms document root or your htdocs folder or your top level of your project, that's always what it's referring to. Is when you enter the folder, this is what you see first. So I almost always will have a folder that is called JS. I almost always will have a folder called CSS, and I almost always will have a folder called images, right? 100% of the time, I'm going to have these 3 things. And sometimes images, like I mentioned earlier, will be named image, IMG, or images, something like that, right? So the reason you would want to pick image, right? If you've got a website that's heavy in images, you might be typing the word images 600 times a day. So the more keystrokes you can save yourself, the easier, right?
Would you not have a HTML folder?
No, you wouldn't, because that's going to be the document root. So almost always, and we didn't really talk about this yesterday or last week, but almost always your entry point to your website is called index.html. Okay, and the exceptions to that would be if you're working in a different programming language, like if you were in a PHP website, this might be index.php. If you're working in a JavaScript project, it might be index.js. Index has become an industry standard of like whatever we touch first is index dot whatever. Whatever language or environment you're in, almost always is going to be index. And there are exceptions, but for the most part, if you see an index, it's going to be in the top level, and that's going to be the first file that is loaded. So if I click the Go Live button on this, let's cancel that one. Okay, if I click Open with Live Server, right? If I just go, let's put some stuff in here. So we're going to use our fancy new technique. We're going to say index page, right? We're going to say H1 index page. Right? So we've got this index page. What index is doing behind the scenes is when I just navigate to the folder, it's looking for a file called index something. So that's why index, that's what it means, index. It's like the list of things to do. So way back in the old days, like the index page would be like, here's a list of all the files in the directory you can read. Now we build really nice websites, but that has carried over that standard so that your main entry point to a website is index.php. Or index.html, and this holds true of even our website, right? So like if I go to moonrise.works, right, this is my business, moonrise.works by itself loads this page, but if I go to index.php, right, because we're running PHP, it's loading this file by default silently. Same as if when we're over here, if I just go to /, right, it's loading that index file. So in your top level, you're going to have your index.html. You're going to usually have your README. But it's important to note that like when you're building a project like this, that README file is probably world readable, right? So I can come in here and say readme.md, and you can see that that is exposed to the world. So if you were just launching this product on a website somewhere, you want to make sure that your README files and stuff don't contain like, here's the password, update the server, right? You don't want to put sensitive information in there. Because it's accessible to the web server. Then we'll have a JS folder. I would put almost all my scripts in there. I would have my image folder, and I'm going to put all my images in there, and I'm going to have a CSS folder and put all my CSS in there. Now, where things get interesting and complicated is that inside my JS folder, I might make a new folder called like libs, like for libraries. And that might be, I might shove all my, if I'm going to use jQuery, if I'm going to use some kind of Google Maps thing, a whole bunch of pre-built JavaScript from somewhere else on the internet, I might shove them all in there just so that I can keep some kind of structure. And what I've seen tend to happen is that if you start with these three things, image, CSS, and JS, as your product or as your project naturally evolves, as you start adding more complexity, you're going to reach different tipping points where you're like, I've got 60 JS files in this folder and like half of them are not being used. That's when you're probably going to start to like, I'm going to make a new folder for this, I'm going to make a new folder for that. That's what I end up seeing pretty commonly. Normally, another thing that is pretty frequent, you'll almost always, you'll want to name, if you're using a logo or some kind of background image, you'll want to name those in a way that it's easy for you to reference them because you'll probably need to use a logo on a lot of pages. In the CSS thing, I almost always will have a top-level CSS file that is named whatever my project is. So if I was in here, I'd probably have new file in here, and it would be like week2.css. And I'm going to be like, every main style for this entire project is going to go in week2.css. But then if I make a special page that is like my fitness tracker, right, I might make a second CSS file that only gets loaded on that page that also inherits the styles from week2.css. So week2.css would be like my brand guidelines, what my fonts look like. I'm going to load that on every page. And then fitnesstracker.css only loads the stuff I need for fitness tracker. So it lets you, that's really what the C part comes from, is cascading style sheets. You can inherit rules both up and down the chain so that you can have one thing that covers the style for everything. And then as you get more granular in your website and in your product, you can split things out. So that's the default structure. Yeah, go ahead.
So let me ask you this. So is it important once you create this file structure and you have things, let's say you've built a really complex, robust website and you've got hundreds of files, and then would it be important to not go moving those files around and sticking them in folders to clean it up, because then your file paths linking to other things are now broken and you have to go through line by line and fix each file path?
Yeah, correct. This is one of the great things about these types of tools like Visual Studio Code. Let's say I have index.html here, and I want to go in here and I say link href equals css, week2.css, right? So I've just made, let's see, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 1 I've just made this style sheet in here, and I can come in here and say, body. I'm gonna have the background color be, let's say like a gray. So we'll say like AAA, right? So it's like a light gray. So when I come into our index page, if I load why is it not? Save it. Let's say font color font is Arial. So this should load. Is it loading now? Let's check. It's not loading our CSS for some reason. And it might be a limitation with our Go Live server. Anyway, how can I explain this? All right, so we've got our file linked here. If I was to go and rename this and say this needs to be actually project.css, all right? One of the things I would do as a part of that move process is I would come in here and go to Edit, Find in Files, and I would look for week2.css. And it will show you all the files that have that changed. And I also have the ability to do replace in files. I can say week2.css for the entire project. I need to change to project.css. Okay. And so now if you look at index.html, replace in files, replace all. Right. So it's going to tell you it's replaced one occurrence. If this was a 50 project long file and we had a whole bunch of stuff, this could quickly get all these little places and make sure you don't miss any and get them all up to date. So I would use a tool like this just so that I can get it all sorted out across the entire scope of the project. However, if you're working in a company, it's probably not a good idea unless you're tasked with this of like, hey, move this file to there. Like, don't just go move things. That will make people cranky. Just because it's not structured nicely. But if you see something not structured nicely, it might be a good idea to be like, hey, I noticed that this is kind of cluttered. We got 600 JavaScript files all in one folder. Like, would it make sense to move this stuff around? Oftentimes, nobody's just gotten around to it yet. And so if you're the new guy and you're asking, hey, I'd love to just clean things up a little bit, sometimes that's a welcome request. Good question. I want to know is why. Maybe I need to make this darker. See? Why is this not loading? Well, we'll have to figure that out before we get into CSS, otherwise it's going to make us angry. So,
Does it have to say the rel attribute?
Yep, that's exactly what it is. Rel equals style sheet. See? You always need to use the correct attributes that the tag requires. And I was just about to go and search W3 schools just to see what we're missing. And there you go. Andrew knew the answer, right? You can rely on your peers to help you out when you get into a sticky jam, which is important. Cool. So now we made our project super ugly. So let's make it less ugly. Let's do CCC. Nice. So now it's less ugly, but still ugly. What else would we like to talk about? So that's a little bit of the history of like what kind of structure you're going to want to do, how you're going to want to follow. I think if you start a brand new if you're starting a brand new project, obviously you can kind of choose your own structure. But some of these other libraries and frameworks like React, Angular, they come with a bunch of stuff that is already stored in places, and you're just going to want to follow along with their convention. Selena's got nothing. She's already ready to go. Estrella, Wendy, Gregory, Leah, anything you want to focus on before tomorrow? I'm going to release the homework right after this class so that you'll be able to start working on that all day tomorrow. It's kind of lengthy. I would just ask you to make sure you're paying attention to detail and doing the things in the order that it wants you to do, because we will keep building on some of this stuff as we go forward. Another thing that was brought up by our guest speaker of last week, it's really something I'm going to ask you to start working on later at the end of this week, which is beginning to work on a portfolio. So I've showed you a couple of examples. This one's mine. I don't use it much to show off, like, it's like a portfolio. This is a project we're on. But I've been doing this so long that to me, it's more interesting to be like, here's a link to all my things. Here's something about me. Here's a little bit of a generic resume, right? Here's some of the stuff I've worked on. It's really just more about like, here's my career at a glance, and it looks okay, right? I feel confident. I built this like 10 years ago, and it still stands up today to the stage where I'm like, I'm not embarrassed by this, and I don't feel like I need to go fiddle with it. One of the things that we are going to do over the span of this course is work on our own portfolios, because it's going to be really important, especially when we start building resumes at the end of the course, that we're going to probably include a link to our portfolio. As a software engineering hiring manager, if you put a website in there, that's the first place I'm going, and I'm judging you within the first 3 seconds. Like, does this look like someone who I want to have on my team? So that portfolio is going to be very interesting. And it's also important that if I'm hiring engineers and you don't provide me a portfolio, I'm thinking things about you as well. Like, portfolios and a good, clean resume is like 98% of what you need to get your foot in the door to an interview. If you don't have those two things, I think you'll struggle. And the third thing is, this was also mentioned, is that you want to have a really good representative LinkedIn that tells you about what you've done, where you've been. This is kind of like a living resume, really. And it's become, especially in engineering, you have to have this. You have to have a LinkedIn portfolio. You heard her mention, like, she's applied for 40 companies, and people are looking at her LinkedIn, and nobody's there. I'm like, if you got your LinkedIn done, you might have applied to 40 companies and gotten 30 phone calls for an interview. These are really important things. And so the quicker you can start working on these. Did everyone have a chance to email Carrie their resumes last week? Okay, great. She's one of the resources that we have here as a part of this course. She's going to help over the next 10 to 11 weeks, starting to shape and polish so that when you graduate the course, you can all hit the ground running and just go off and get great jobs and remember fondly of your time you spent in a code boot camp. And then we'll ask you to be a guest speaker in the future, and that'd be fun. What else would we like to talk about today? Anything? You guys all got it? You ready to build your web page? All right. Well, I'm going to sit here awkwardly for 30 minutes. Feel free to head home early, or we can chat about anything you want. We can talk about what it was like programming computers back in the old days when there was no internet, or talk about web design theory, whatever you want. I'm going to pause the recording, and we'll see everybody tomorrow.